Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome to another TechstrongTV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Thursday, March 10th, and we are counting down 7 days until St. Patrick's Day. I guess I am counting. I was going to say not that I'm counting, but I'm counting. So I'm really looking forward to that coming up. And I'm looking forward to today's broadcast. We're going to get things kicked off with a conversation between Alan and Shrav Mehta, who is the CEO and founder of SecureFrame. SecureFrame offers a platform for security compliance automation. They automate the compliance process for certifications such as SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and PCI DSS, all very difficult compliance issues to deal with. So what SecureFrame is doing for organizations, I think, is going to be very well received in the space. After that, Alan speaks with Anurag Gupta, who is the co-founder of a new company called Calyptia. Calyptia has a platform for first-mile observability, which is very, very important in DevOps and application development in general. They just announced a seed funding round of $5 million that was led by Sierra Ventures and Carbide Ventures, and they also had participation from Acti Ventures and other angel investors. And Calyptia Enterprise, which is their platform, is based on the FluentBit and FluentD open source projects that enables every company to scale and gather better insights from their observability pipelines. Good stuff there, and I wish Anurag and the whole Calyptia team the best as they move forward. All right, after that, we have the next installment of our Tech Strong Women show, and it's one that I host along with Tracy Bannon from MITRE. And in this episode, we are talking to our guest, Nicole Dove, who is a rock star in the industry. She recently started her new position as head of security over at Riot Games, and we discuss her kind of non-traditional path into IT and some of the ways in which women can actually unconsciously sabotage themselves in the workplace, as well as having the impact that a strong mentor, regardless of gender, can bring to not only to a female or women's career path, but also help them become just a better person overall. So she's an awesome person to talk to, and we certainly had a great conversation. I hope you can check that one out for sure. After that, we have the lab with Brendan O'Leary. This is just the latest in the updates coming out of GitLab. Brendan always comes on. He's the DevOps senior developer evangelist over at GitLab, and he always tells us about what's happening over there. So do check that one out also. And then after that, we have our Something Old segment that is from the Predict 2022 virtual event. This one is a presentation by Carrie Perlson, who is with MIT in the CAMS Research Consortium. Carrie's topic is titled 2022 is the year to build a cybersecurity culture. So she shares her work with MIT Sloan School's research group, and she discusses some of the current ways in which malicious actors are trying to steal money and company data and infiltrate our systems. And she also talks about some actions that organizations can do here in 2022 to change the behaviors of those around them, so it becomes more of a group effort to ensure the highest quality cybersecurity in an organization. Good stuff there. After that, I'm back with the news headlines, and then I have a great conversation with David Williams, who is the VP of Product Strategy over at Quali. David and I talk about DevOps and DevOps governance and the importance of governance in DevOps, and he also offers up some of his top tips to ensure better governance within DevOps. This is a great conversation that he and I have, and there are certainly a lot of takeaways in it, so I do hope you'll check that one out. After that, I've got the webinar's preview for you, and then we close things out today with The View with Vizard, in which Mike Vizard is speaking with Dario Forte, who is the Vice President and General Manager for Security Orchestration over at Sumo Logic. They discuss why the management of security is shifting to the cloud, if it hasn't already. But this is a great conversation, and it too has a lot of insights to be had during it. So definitely want to check that one out. All right, that's today's lineup, and we're going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, we are back. Kicking off today's TechstrongTV broadcast is a conversation between Alan and Shrav Mehta, who is the CEO and founder over at SecureFrame. SecureFrame is a relatively new company. They offer a platform for security compliance automation. So anything related to SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, PSI, DSS, SecureFrame takes care of it for you. So it's a great technology and it's a great conversation. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another TechstrongTV episode. I've got a new company and a new person to introduce you to in this episode. Let me introduce you to Shrav Mehta. Hey Shrav, welcome to TechstrongTV, man.
Hey Alan, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So, Shrav, you know what? I'm going to let you kind of introduce you and your company yourself a little bit. Why don't we start a little bit with your background and then we'll get to the company.
Yeah. So, I started out building Android apps when I was around 12 years old. I grew that business significantly, but I had the day-to-days of, going to middle school and high school. So I wasn't really able to spend a lot of time on that business. And eventually, I decided, hey, I want to work with like the best startup founders I can. I was fascinated with the rise of developer tools and security, which led me to working with some of the best founders in Silicon Valley. And, while I was at these companies, security compliance was a big, painful problem that we dealt with at each one of these. And at one startup I had worked at, we'd spent over $100,000 on lawyers and security consultants to help us. And we really ended up nowhere after a long time. So it got me really, really interested in this space.
Excellent. And then tell us about your company.
Yeah, so a little bit about SecureFrame. We make it super easy for companies to streamline their security compliance and get certifications like SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, PCI, and the long tail of other certifications that pretty much every business these days needs.
Sure. And so you're a co-founder, yeah? Give us, a lot of people out here, everyone out here wants to be an entrepreneur or believes they could start a company. So you had this background starting when you're 12, right? You finished school, you work in some Silicon Valley companies. How did you and your co-founders decide, hey man, we're gonna start a company? What made you want to start the company? I mean, as you said, compliance you recognized was a bear for many companies, right? But like, how did you go about it and put this company together?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really about getting to work with like my best friends at work like every day on something really meaningful and making like significant progress and like impact on the industry and, hopefully the world. So I knew that I really wanted to start a company of my own, and I was just waiting for, the right thing to come to me. And I had, explored a bunch of different ideas, but nothing I was like super passionate or excited about, until I landed on SecureFrame. So I had worked with a lot of really amazing founders. And I think, some of the biggest things I've learned is you have to just have like a lot of passion, a lot of commitment. You can never give up on, what you're working on. So if you're not super excited, about what you're working on, it's going to be really hard to go down a 7 to 10 year journey. And pretty much every entrepreneur, every founder, every CEO I've worked with, just has an amazing amount of grit, amount of passion, for what they're working on. And, they are folks that will never give up. And I think that is one of the most important attributes of any founder. I think you just have to be, incredibly passionate about what you're working on. And, for me, I was just fascinated with developer tools and security. And, this just seemed like the perfect kind of thing for me, to spend, a decade on. And I, got really excited. And when I started talking to, some of my friends about it, they were like, hey, this sounds like really interesting. I've dealt with some of these pain points. And, once we started, kind of working on an MVP, talking to some customers that, we had just kind of advised and helped for free, while we were, working our other full-time jobs, we realized that, hey, we're kind of onto something. There is a whole new world of like security and compliance that, is out of date that needs to be brought into the future, especially with the increase in, cyber attacks and, increase in like data breaches. It just became, a top, issue for a lot of companies.
Yep, absolutely. Excuse me. And, we've been running through stuff, but I want to make sure we make clear to the audience the name of the company and the website.
It's just SecureFrame, and you can go to secureframe.com or you can go to SOC2.com, and you'll find us.
Yep, SOC2, SOC2, number 2, or secureframe.com. Great. So, it's funny, actually. I recorded yesterday. We have this video show we do called DevOps Unbound, and the topic of yesterday's show was, DevOps and compliance. Does DevOps help compliance, reality or myth? And because, part of the promise of DevOps is, that we could somehow automate compliance into the software development lifecycle, that we could somehow make non-security folks, developers and DevOps engineers care enough to make sure, that we're documenting for compliance sake our CI/CD processes and what's in there, and building compliance in without slowing down the development process. So I'm wondering, is that kind of what you guys are doing at SecureFrame, or is it, still on the right side of the ledger, if you will, looking at, post-deployment compliance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so great question. The way I'll put it is that compliance has a lot of different elements to it. And the way I typically explain it to people is like, SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, PCI, all of these, kind of frameworks are just giant lists of things that you have to do in order to secure your business. And not necessarily all of them are technical. For a lot of these certifications or, frameworks or security standards, they're all, HIPAA is like a law technically. SOC 2 is like a framework that the AICPA created, just to, be extra clear here. But, all of these frameworks are really just giant lists of things that you have to do. And, some of these items can be more non-technical, like making sure that all your employees go through background checks, that you have proper employee onboarding and offboarding processes. But there is a technical component to, pretty much all of these, security standards. So, for SOC 2, you have to, often go into your cloud infrastructure like in AWS and make sure that, everything's encrypted at transit and at rest. You want to make sure that you have CloudTrail enabled for audit logging in AWS. And these items are a lot more technical. And in the past, what you do is you might have like a giant checklist. You'd have to kind of interpret the rules and the guidelines that the AICPA sets and look at like the controls that you guys might have set at the company. And then you'd go through it kind of like a checklist, and you'd say, hey, is every server that we have encrypted? Are all our S3 buckets encrypted? Is this EBS volume encrypted? And, there's just so many resources in like the average AWS account. There's over 20 regions. I think there's over 200 products and new ones being launched all the time. So you can imagine that this is like a very, just a really slow process, and it's very error prone to have a human go through all this, especially if you have like a very large company, a very large AWS account. It's just not very feasible. So you end up doing these checks like once a quarter, and that's just not very safe or secure. When you're not doing those checks is when you're most vulnerable. So with SecureFrame, for example, the way we solve this is we integrate into your AWS environment. We have a simple CloudFormation template or Terraform template that you could set up. We take read-only access using like AWS's security audit permissions profile, and we take a look at all your resources and we scan them daily, or you could change the frequency to whatever you want, and we're going to tell you, hey, these new resources you added in aren't compliant, they aren't encrypted, or hey, you didn't enable CloudTrail or GuardDuty or whatever the right settings or configurations are for your business, and we will help make sure that you continuously stay on top of any changes in your environment. So that's kind of how SecureFrame helps automate these processes processes versus the old ways of really kind of manually checking all this stuff. And, when you hear this, you're like, oh my God, like, why didn't we, always do this? This seems so, obvious, but it's really that the APIs, to automate a lot of these processes just weren't available till very recently.
That was part of, we brought that up in the discussion yesterday, which is, you can't make wine before it's time, right? A lot of what these APIs, a lot of what, the automation kind of hooks, if you will, they weren't there. So you can't blame people for not, it just wasn't there. So, now we have the opportunity certainly to do this. Let's turn though, without diving too deep into the technology right now, you guys also recently announced though that some fundraising and go-to-market stuff. Why don't you share with our audience a little bit, Shrav?
Yeah, so we raised $56 million from Accomplice Ventures, and Mike Viscuso, who's a partner at Accomplice and the former CEO of Carbon Black, is joining our board of directors. And we had, a lot of our other investors like Kleiner Perkins, Optum Ventures, Kaiser, Gradient, Soma Capital, and tons of other investors who've been supporting us for a long time, participate in this round. And we're really excited about it. Over the last year, just some quick highlights. We've increased our ARR by 10x in 2021. We've increased our customer base by 7x. We've grown our team to over 80 people, and we're planning on doubling, in 2022. And we brought on a lot of amazing customers like Instabase, Doodle, Top Funnel, Slab, Coda, Blob, AngelList, Ramp, and so many others. And we're incredibly excited by the progress we made in the last year and all the things that are coming in 2022.
Absolutely. One of the things, again, and I have a long history with compliance. I've been in security for 20 plus years. I think people get confused. It's not like there's a single law of the land, right? As you said, there's SOC, there's ISO, there's HIPAA, there's PCI, there's GDPR, there's all different ones. And for many folks, in their line of business, they have to deal with more than one. One of the things I've always tried to, like when I'm consulting or, when I was in that business, was to say, look, there's only one truth. There's only one sort of best practices. If you follow basic hygiene in cyber, right, and security, basic best practices, documenting stuff, doing the right thing, generally speaking, I don't care how many guidelines, frameworks, security, compliance, regulations you fall under, doing the right thing here will often check the boxes in all of them, or nearly all of them, right? There might be, as you mentioned, non-technical things that are, specific to an individual regulation. But the bulk of it all, they're all based on best practices. Mm-hmm. So doing that, really helps you get to, it makes it a lot less confusing and a lot less sort of, I think some people look at it and say, oh my God, look at all this stuff, right? How am I going to do it all? and I think that helps a lot. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. Excuse me, I got to check. So, Shrav, now, you've raised the money, 80 people and growing, 10x revenue. What do you think is on the horizon for 2022 here? What's the big story for you guys over the next year?
Yeah. We have a whole lot of different things in the works. I think you're going to see a lot of major changes to our platform over the next year. We've talked to a lot of our customers, got a lot of feedback on some of the problems that they're having, some of the things that they need help with as they grow and scale their organizations. One of the big things is when we started SecureFrame, we just launched with SOC 2 and ISO 27001. ISO 27001 is more or less like the SOC 2 equivalent internationally. So if you're talking to companies in Europe or Asia, that's typically where you're going to get asked about that, a lot more. And one of the big things that companies came to us with is, hey, SOC 2 is already a lot of stuff to do. And then when they actually got to using SecureFrame, they're like, wow, this is way easier. We're automating so much more that, we couldn't in the past. And it's just made everything a lot more accessible. It's kind of made everything a lot more secure. And so, customers start to say, hey, with the kind of the rise of remote work, we're selling to a lot of companies internationally. So, we started, packaging SOC 2 and ISO 27001 together in a lot more deals. And the way our platform works, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, is that a lot of these controls between different frameworks are shared. A lot of different frameworks have controls for background checks or making sure everything's encrypted at rest and in transit. And so when you kind of complete one of these controls and we automate it in Secure Frame, you're kind of knocking out two birds or multiple birds with one stone. So you're not actually doing the same thing over and over again, uploading the same evidence, managing the same processes. You do it once for kind of everything, that has every framework that has like a relevant security control, which makes it a lot easier to comply with more and more frameworks. So, one of the big focuses for Secure Frame over the next year is, expanding to support larger companies, more traditional GRC automation workflows, and, helping companies cater to the InfoSec programs that they already have set up. Before 2014, 2015, I would, argue that SOC 2 was not really like the de facto standard by any means. It was definitely around. People were talking about it. You sell to a Fortune 100, you're going to have to get that SOC 2. But for the most part, people had their own custom InfoSec programs that more or less reflected a lot of what these frameworks have today. Kind of like you're saying, they have all the best practices and they took them, formed the frameworks. And now we're, working with companies to, support their custom InfoSec programs that often go above and beyond just the requirements of compliance. I have kind of a saying, you can never be, you can never be less secure. There's always more and more things that you could do, especially with the rise in cyber attacks and threats. So there's always going to be tons for, Secure Frame to build with our customers. And we've just gotten so much feedback on, different problems our customers are having. So you'll see a lot of new products in that regard.
I like that because, again, as an old security guy, one of the things about compliance that I always worry about is that a false sense of security that people say, oh, I'm SOC 2 compliant, I'm good. Well, no, you're not good. You're compliant. But it doesn't mean you're impenetrable or you're uber secured or anything like that. And many times, I always used to like to say, compliance is the beginning, not the end of security, right? It represents sort of that minimum bar, but there's much more to do. So hearing that, Secure Frame is looking to take people from here to there is good stuff. Hey, just for people who didn't catch it, give us that website again.
Secureframe.com, or you can also just go to SOC2, just like the number 2.com, and you'll find us.
Perfect. Hey, Shrav, thanks for coming up on TechstrongTV. Congratulations on the money raise. Keep doing great things at Secure Frame and come back and keep us posted, okay?
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Alan. I really appreciate it. Talk soon.
Not a problem. Shrav Mehta, Secure Frame, here on TechstrongTV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, Alan is speaking with Anurag Gupta, who is the co-founder of a company called Calyptia, which just recently closed its seed funding round of $5 million, which was led by Sierra Ventures and Carbide Ventures. They also had participation from Acti Ventures and some other angel investors. And so the Calyptia enterprise is actually based on the open source FluentBit and FluentD projects, which enables every company to scale and gather better insights from their observability pipelines. It's a great technology, and all the best to Calyptia, and it's a great conversation. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another TechstrongTV segment. My guest this segment is Anurag Gupta. Anurag is the CEO founder of a company that they just raised their seed round. I'm going to let him tell you all about it though. Anurag, welcome to TechstrongTV.
Thank you so much, Alan. Really appreciate you having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. We love hearing from, entrepreneurs and new companies to market, introducing them to the audience. We're going to get to the news in just a second, Anurag, but let's kind of lay a little background. Let's give us a little of your background. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in the monitoring observability space, whatever the hot word to call it is, for about the past 8 years. I started my career at Microsoft in an unlikely place, the Unix Linux team under Ballmer. Was that in the basement, like down in the dark corner, or where was that? It was thankfully up at a high level in one of the buildings, but we definitely had a couple of those dark rooms that house a couple of developers. But no, it was a great experience. You learn all about the Unix Linux world, AIX, Solaris, HPUX, Red Hat, whatever there, and learned about how things work on Azure, which was pretty new at the time. We had Hyper-V, which was the hypervisor. And then, of course, the management services and monitoring, which is where I focused, System Center and Microsoft's offering there. Now, that was a great place to start my career and try to learn about this like really broad world of Unix, Linux, what tools were there and what was going on in Windows. We ended up really doubling down on open source at Microsoft after Satya Nadella joined, and that was awesome. And within that, I joined the Azure Log Analytics team. And within that team, we looked at open source projects, things that could accelerate the value to our users. And one project that stood out was this project called FluentD. And FluentD happened to be an open source project built by a couple folks at a company called Treasure Data. Started getting some traction in some big companies, and we said, hey, let's use this. Let's ship it with Azure Log Analytics. Became our log analytics agent for Linux. Still is, to this point today. And that was a really awesome experience. I love the technology so much that I decided to go and join Treasure Data for a little bit and work on FluentD full time. So I worked as the product manager there for a bit. The company was awesome. It was doing really well. It ended up actually getting acquired by ARM. And really? I decided, okay, I'm going to go. I want to learn more about open source and enterprise, where to go. And I went to Elastic. So I spent a couple years at Elastic, learned a ton about how to market open source, how to build a really sustainable business around it, how to build a cloud around it. I worked in the cloud product team there. Mm-hmm. And I still kept in touch with all the Fluent folks back at Treasure Data. And after I left Elastic, Eduardo Silva, who's my co-founder, he created the sub project there called FluentBit, and it's another open source project, really high usage. And we started talking about some of the stats, and he said, it's getting 1 million deployments per day. And I was like, whoa. And it's like, it's starting to get used by all the cloud providers. Everyone was starting to look at FluentBit as the successor to FluentD, high performance, high throughput, and said, let's do it. And then, late 2020, pandemic year, we said, let's go for it. And we started Calyptia, basically our business. And we said, how can we take the success that's going on with FluentBit and all the questions that were coming in from major banks and healthcare companies and cloud providers and build something a bit more sustainable, right? Instead of just this 1 or 2 person team at this company, let's build a business, sustain this, make it really accessible for those that need it and really valuable for the enterprises that depend on it. So that was our hypothesis, our goal for Calyptia.
I love it. Before we jump in a little bit more into this, can you spell the name so that people, in case it's not coming through to them clearly?
Yeah, of course. It's Calyptia. And the name stems from the hummingbird genus. It's an interesting thing. Is FluentBit and FluentD, these open source projects, we use birds as logos. FluentBit is a hummingbird. And so we said, what is the evolution of that? It's Calyptiae, which is the genus of hummingbirds. And we said Calyptia, as Eduardo comes from Chile, Costa Rica. And so,
got it. Very cool. And the website for Calyptia?
Yeah, calyptia.com. So CALYPTIA.
Just wanted to get that out of the way.
Totally.
You know, Anurag, as I'm sure you have learned, we've come a long way in open source business models since, everybody used to say, the only open source that was ever successful was Red Hat, right? Everything else, there's plenty of open source success stories now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every single open source project can be a commercial success or fit into, one of the kind of given models that people have run, right? What we've seen is, just offering support and training generally isn't enough for a successful model. Offering a SaaS-based version is one way. Another way is sort of that open core concept where you have freemium modules or freemium feature sets that are not, part of that open core, if you will. Let's talk a little bit about the Calyptia model.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we follow a very traditional path that I think most open source companies will do, which is you look at the audience and you look at the community. We spend months just talking to the community. So is there even enough value here? Probably talk to 100 folks, developers, users, practitioners, whatever may exist out there. And as we went out and chatted with them, we found out there's these common threads of problems, challenges, and these are not things that they would expect open source to go fulfill. They would expect a product or some sort of new tooling to go out and address. So we went and said, let's go and give the traditional enterprise support, consulting, get our feet wet and figure out what are those major challenges that we could solve with the product later on. And then as we did that, we started building tools for the community. We built a Calyptia Cloud, which allows you to do visualization, validation, these typical problems that come with using open source. Today now we have an enterprise product. We have folks who use that in production. Now we are basically, commercial open source. You have proprietary products built on top of that core engine that we still maintain.
Absolutely. And the open source project was what's it called again?
It's FluentD and FluentBit.
Right.
And FluentD is still
widely used as far as I know.
Absolutely.
Or is it, right? FluentBit doesn't necessarily replace FluentD, correct?
It's an interesting dynamic. It can. We've built FluentBit so that now it has the full functionality of
FluentD in there.
Yep, but you can still use them together. Many banks, have 100,000 servers. They'll have FluentBit and FluentD still dispersed throughout their environment.
Got it. All right. We've got that all out of the way a little bit now on our. So you guys recently announced the money raise. I guess it's your first.
Yes.
Money in. Share with the audience a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, we really focused on, we have these users that are coming to us. We're delivering oldest value. We are building out product that folks are asking for. They're asking for features, asking for how can they solve these different challenges, which are high observability costs. How do we manage this in production? How do we manage this on Kubernetes, multi-cloud environments? And we had built a control layer. We call it Calyptia Enterprise for FluentBit. It allows you to use multi-cloud, Red Hat OpenShift, public cloud providers, and have a central way to manage all your various instances of FluentBit for very, very high scale. And we said, we're getting all this demand for it. How do we go meet that? And naturally, we lean towards venture capital to come in and say, hey, let's go ahead and really invest. And we took that and said, we want to invest in two ways. One is very much so in our enterprise product, fulfilling and building that business. But the second, which is, I think is very, very useful, is building the developer tools and experience for our community. We try to give as much value to the community as possible. And when you get to more of those policies, hyperscale, auto scaling, auto healing, those type of feature and functionality sets, we then say, hey, we can automate that and bring you that in a productized form. And that's really where our product value is. Well, developer tools, how do I use the tool? That's all stuff that we want to keep giving away, get folks, get started as quickly as possible.
Cool. And now, raising that money, what does that kind of enable, if you will? You don't have to tell us where you're spending the money, obviously, but, as a result of raising the money, what can we expect to see?
Yeah, you'll see a lot more of our enterprise product come to fruition. We're building a really great team to build that out. Get the certifications and standards that are useful in an enterprise environment. And then you'll also see a lot more interaction with the community as we continue building these tool sets. So we just released a GitHub action, which is like an automated way to check how if your configuration is running correctly or not. So you'll continue to see those type of freemium tools that you have to use GitHub for, but are Apache too. And you'll still see a lot more of this, our enterprise product as we build that out. I'll get that in front of as many users as possible to give us feedback, just kind of meeting the demand that we're seeing.
Excellent. So, in an age where so many open source projects have been donated to foundations, Linux Foundation, CNCF, CDF, all of the daughter foundations under that, and they're not the only foundation, though. There are others. What if any, plans are around for you guys around that?
So the benefit here is FluentD was donated to the CNCF in 2016.
Yep.
And so
it was graduated, was it not?
Or a graduated level project, right? Exactly. Which means, for those who are unfamiliar, there's 3 different levels: sandbox, incubating, graduated. There might be another one in there, but graduated is the highest level. Other graduated projects, Kubernetes, Prometheus, represents a level of high maturity and deployment and contributors within that ecosystem.
Yeah. And FluentBit, though, is not CNCF.
FluentBit is a sub-project of FluentD.
So it's considered a sub-project. I didn't realize. Okay.
Yeah. So it still gets all the same benefits of a graduated project because it's part of that same ecosystem.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize it was a sub-project. I thought it was a standalone separate thing. Yeah. Very cool. So that means, I guess, you'll be at KubeCon and some of the CNCF
events
coming up.
KubeCon Europe. We actually have a FluentCon Europe.
Really? Monday or Tuesday?
That will be on the Monday, May 16th. So, for folks who want to sign up for that, we'll be super happy to chat with you. Also, watch the videos from last year in North America. Some awesome content, speakers from like Neiman Marcus, Fidelity, Microsoft, Amazon, and others, just talking about production usage and how they're solving these challenges today. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. We mentioned the website. It's obviously an open source tool, so people can download it for free and get busy right away.
Totally.
Also, I just wanted to give people a little bit of a sense of the success of FluentD and FluentBit. Like you mentioned, 1 million downloads a day or 1 million installs a day, something like that, right?
Yep.
I remember seeing numbers in the billions for total amount of downloads. That's correct, right?
Yeah. So that was when Eduardo and I were starting. Now, today, we're at 2 million per day with FluentBit. These are deployments, Docker deployments, just from a single repo. And that also, we just passed 1 billion total deployments of FluentBit. So if you go to our Docker Hub, you'll look at the pulls, you'll see that's now exceeded the 1 billion count there as well. And we've been, it's the benefit of Fluent Bit is it's embedded within Google and Amazon and Microsoft and their Kubernetes offerings. And we don't get to see those numbers. So, you could imagine that there's hundreds of millions of more out there. That
absolutely,
yeah.
What a great story, Anurag. Right, you've got much to be proud of there. It's good. It's a good, solid, open source success story. So congratulations to you and the whole team. One more time, tell people the website if they're interested. They go get more info.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks so much for having me, Calypti.com. And you can sign up there for Calypti Cloud. Should take less than a minute. You can get started. Yeah, invite everyone
Very cool.
Come participate.
I appreciate it. Anurag Gupta from Calypti here on TechstrongTV. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with another guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we are back, and I am so excited about this next episode. This next show. This is the next episode in our Tech Strong Women series. This one features myself and Tracy Bannon from MITRE. We are the co-hosts for the show, and we speak with Nicole Dove in this episode. She just recently started a new position as head of security over at Riot Games, and there are so many things that we discussed during our 45-minute conversation, including Nicole's non-traditional path to IT and how she relied so heavily on her mentors to help her grow not only into her technology role and her cybersecurity role, but also just become a better person. It's a great conversation. We also talk about ways in which females, especially in the IT sector, can subconsciously sabotage themselves in their career path. And so, speaking from experience, all three of us have a lot to say on pretty much every one of these topics that we're about to discuss. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and roll Tech Strong Women. Hey everybody, welcome back to TechstrongTV and welcome to another episode of Tech Strong Women, the ongoing series that elevates the conversation about gender equity and parity by celebrating the successes of females in IT and so much more. We have so many great conversations. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, as you probably know, but my co-host is Tracy Bannon with MITRE. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me, as always.
Oh, I always get so excited. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a co-host with you.
Oh, listen, we're equals. We are equals. We're not, superior or inferior. And with us today, we have Nicole Dove, who is an amazing female in IT, cybersecurity, and just a rock star in the industry. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really thrilled to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I love anything, effort, or people who celebrate women in tech. So this is like the party to be at. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. All right. Well, hopefully we'll do right by you today. But do want to thank you again for being here. We've got a lot to unpack in today's show. But really, what I want to do is start out by telling us a little bit about what you're doing today, and maybe how you got to be where you are.
Yeah. So I've got like 50 jobs, and it's easy because I love them all. So by day, I'm head of security at Riot Games, which is super exciting. It's a new role for me. So I'm really, really happy to be there. Fantastic team, fantastic products and services. I'm also a visiting lecturer at a local university, Clark Atlanta University. And I also extend my teaching into being a LinkedIn Learning instructor where I create cybersecurity courses. And then I sit on a couple boards for 2 tech startups. One is called Wraith Audio and the other is called CyberSaint. So a lot of tech, a lot of learning, a lot of teaching, a lot of people in my world. But I love all of it and I wouldn't change it for anything.
So how did you find your way, though, to this most recent, right? The head of security. You're one of the few females that I've met so far who are truly head of security. I've got lots of women who are on the rise. And in the security area in particular, it is booming. And that's awesome. It's completely amazing. How did you find your way into that role?
I slipped and fell into tech. And this role was something that I don't know that I expected, but I think that I found myself looking for an opportunity to have impact, right? So my career started, I went to school for accounting and finance. I started my career on Wall Street. It was all I wanted to do. And when I got there, I quickly realized this may not be it, right? So I've got, I don't know if it translates, but I've got purple hair.
Oh, it does. I see it.
Yeah, right? So, back in the day, 20 years ago, it wasn't as accepted as it is now. Or, a young woman of color who looks different, presents, different than the typical Wall Streeter. Maybe to be accepted or to rise through the ranks. But I learned a lot. I learned so much. Got into consulting. I loved solving people's problems, right? I loved working on different engagements with different teams and different clients. And I really, really loved the travel. But again, much of the Big Four consulting culture did mimic Wall Street. So I said, I've got to figure out how to actually make a change because I began to see how culture impacts the business. So I went all the way to a video game company. I worked at Take-Two that owns Rockstar, had a blast, stayed there about 5 years, did some video game voiceover work, got my first promotion. I was like, I found my people. And then I wanted to do something a little different. So I got into audit. At a payroll company. And that's where I started to just explore all types of things. I was on a team. We built, staffed, and managed international work centers in Philippines, Romania, India, Brazil. I got to live in Romania for a little while. That was fascinating. But then I started to see how every single thing I did, whether it be Wall Street and Treasury and video games or payroll or even international operations, tech was the common thread. Right? We essentially took 20% of the company's headcount and staffed it overseas, and they were able to be seamless and flawless because of technology. I'm like, there's something with this thing. So I really just took, my expertise from risk and my willingness to learn tech. And that's how I got into cyber. And what I love about this role is, as the company is growing so rapidly, you see what's happening in the industry, ransomware attacks, new technology. I mean, everything is just exponentially changing. What I like is that I get to bring that business background to cyber, to tech, and help people understand that tech is not, it doesn't slow you down. If you position it correctly, it can actually enable innovation and speed and agility and creativity. And that's what I love most. I would have never, ever thought I would work in tech. I can barely hook up a printer, but I know risk, right? And I know people. And a lot of tech is people and risk and really just getting the best product and service to the customer. And that's essentially what brought me right here today.
What I love about that story is the fact that you did not swim in your own lane. You were you're going back and forth. So many people, I think, just kind of create a vision for themselves and they go for it. This is my goal in life is to be a cybersecurity professional. Great. But you've had a lot of so many varied experiences that you've been able to kind of parlay into what you're doing now. And I wonder how did you create the narrative behind that? Because, when you're thinking about say a job title or a job description, and you're maybe going for a particular job or something like that, so many women, we've had this discussion before, if they don't check all the boxes, they'll never apply for a particular job. And so, so many times you look at a job description, you're like, I'm just not sure that, people, what my skills are will resonate or will translate very well without me actually having to explain how things go and how they do actually work. So how have you created the narrative around your experience into what you're doing today and how it all fits together?
Yeah. So creating and changing narratives is the story, right? And I think the important part was not allowing these unicorn job descriptions to intimidate me, right? I think a second motivation was seeing men in positions that they didn't qualify for. I'm like, well, you know what? If they could do it, why not? Right. And so, but as a woman, like we think a lot, we're very tactical, right? We think things through. I tried to not think so much about what I couldn't do and thought about what I could do. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'll look at a job description, everything I have, I'll cross that out. I've got that in the bag. Then I look at the things that I don't have and think through, how can I get these things? Or what in my experience may not be exactly this, but lends another perspective on this that I can bring. And then the last part is I'm a non-traditional technologist. So there's going to be a host of things that I bring that nobody else is going to bring. Right. And that's going to be like the magic potion. So, I often challenge women. One of my mentors said, I don't even read the job description. Right. But it takes away that intimidation factor because there's so much of the job that's not on the paper. That's always something I ask in interviews. What do I need to know about this job that I cannot read on this paper? And those are the things that, we need to be prepared for, because it's not so much what you expect to happen. The challenges are always the unexpected. And so just by digging in that tool belt and keeping an inventory for my own self, it helps you have something to pull from when you're changing that story or wanting to change your story and wanting to know what you can leverage to unlock that next level.
Well, you bring up a really good point, a side conversation, which is what has happened with job descriptions. They've become magic unicorn listings. Right. And quite frankly, anybody that I interview, any that I look at, there's never anybody who can check all of the boxes.
Yes.
And it was an important message 20 years ago, but it's an even more important message now. And there's a reverse to that, which is the folks who are putting those things out need to not focus on finding unicorns. You might run across one by accident or the 4-leaf clover in that one yard that you walk by. But in general, what are those applicable skills? What are the crossovers? And what you had was a lot of crossover skills and a uniqueness that other people didn't bring to the table. That's thought diversity, right? Educational diversity, background diversity, right? That's what has helped to jettison you forward. That's fantastic advice.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I'd be interested when you are going through and working and mentoring with other people and helping them to figure out what they want to do with their career. Are there times where they'll bring a job description and you'll help them to walk through, like, don't look at this or interpret it in that way? Do you help them apply the same skills that you've done for yourself?
Absolutely. So this is an exercise that I've used. So this exercise actually was a big part of me coming into tech, right? I was very intimidated by the job descriptions and technology. And it was only because of amazing mentors who were just like, no, you can do this. Go in the room and sell what you have, right? You can do this. And so it's, things are so much bigger when we don't put them down on paper. right? And so, and I realized that a lot of other professionals feel that same intimidation, whether it's within their own field or going into a new field, especially going into a new field, even more going into tech, right? Because it just seems so huge and big and so much relies on it, right? And so because that exercise was so successful for me, it's something I walk people through when they have something that they want to do, when they have a big role they want to apply for. Like, it's a great way to pressure test it, right? Because now you walk in pretty much knowing what they want and what they expect. And now you have the opportunity to align yourself with that and be honest about what you don't have, right? But what your thought process is to how you will get it. Because nobody knows everything, right?
I'm going to guess there are times where, whether it's you or whether it's somebody that you mentor, goes into this conversation and the interviewers walk away going, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought about that. Right. And so whether they hire you or not, they've learned and gained kind of in this, odd reverse mentoring that happens when you're bringing those new ideas to the table.
Oh, yeah. And I've had some interviews that I've done horribly on, but those were learning experiences too, right?
Yeah. I feel like, with these job descriptions in particular, I think companies do that on purpose so that they can kind of gauge the type of people who do end up applying for those jobs, because those are the ones who are the mavericks, if you will. Those are the ones who really feel as though they can bring as much as possible to the table. And they know that they're not, they don't have 45 years of whatever, but they think that they're qualified for the job, and that alone should get them in the door. But at the end of the day, it's kind of this push and pull between being what people expect you to be and being your authentic self, your true self, what you're capable of doing and who you are at your heart. And that sometimes can be a difficult thing to reconcile, being your true authentic self when you don't tick all the boxes. And so has that ever been a challenge for you to kind of get beyond just knowing that maybe who you are is not really everything that this person wants you to be on paper, but that you bring so much more to the conversation?
So let's unpack the term, like who they want you to be, right? Yeah. Because what they really want is somebody who can get the job done, right? We get in our heads like, and I am so guilty. And honestly, Charlene, I'm guilty of this with every single job that I take, even till this day. I don't know why this is a lesson I have to keep learning, but it's like, as soon as I step outside the box and I do something bigger, I'm like, oh crap, they really think I can do this. Like, oh, okay, I got to deliver now. And you get so caught up in that ticking and tying and going back to that profile that sometimes you don't see the forest for the trees. Because when you really take a look, it's like, it's not about knowing those things. It's about it's not even about knowing everything. It's about being relentless about finding the solution, being resourceful about looking for the answer, right? If there's something that you don't know, instead of just going to ask someone, figure out a couple options. Do you know how much I Google like all the time, right? And I felt so bad about that at first, but now that I've been in cyber for a while, I realized there are so many domains. Like, I know a little bit about everything, right? But sometimes I need that deep expertise. I'm not expected to be an expert across the board. So I think it's more about taking a step back and understanding what's needed to thrive and be successful in the role, and making sure that I'm checking those boxes as opposed to like a set of technical aptitudes and expertises, because I'm not going to have that. I study all the time now, and it's never going to happen. But it takes some time. And as much as I'm saying this, I'm probably going to be going through this tomorrow anyway. So.
I think that it's common, and I'm finding that at first I thought that it was more women. Sometimes we call it the imposter syndrome, and I used to think maybe it was more more with females. But I'm actually realizing that it's not. It's everywhere. It's everybody. However, to your point earlier, I do see a difference with a woman looking at the list and wanting to be a perfectionist and looking to check mark everything on that list, where sometimes a man goes, I got 3 out of 5. That's good enough. And I think what you're saying is, don't worry about everything that's there. Be close, be energetic, bring your life to it, bring all of your life energy along with you and see what happens with it. See what happens with it. You know, along that line is the number of changing job requirements that where job descriptions where they no longer are including advanced degrees. I'm seeing a lot in technology where it's like, yeah, we used to want a master's degree in computer science and somebody who is doing postdoctoral. There'd be wonderful educational, academic credentials that they would want. IBM is one of the first ones to say, let's go non-traditional, and they're expanding their workforce in crazy amounts. Like, do you think that that's helping with some of the other work that you're doing? I really want to hear a little bit about IANS and that kind of mentoring, because you're helping, you know, people who are in all kinds of different roles. You're not necessarily mentoring kids at that point. You're out there mentoring the world.
Yeah. So I love this question because I think, and especially with me now having a foot in the education, the academia world, I'm seeing things shift, right? I love LinkedIn Learning because it saved me so many days, right? Because there can be a project that I need to work on or lead that I might not have in-depth experience in. And I can go and find a course on LinkedIn Learning, and within an hour, right, I've got a foundational understanding of what's happening from a verified expert or professional. And my certificates from Harvard, my double bachelor's from Clark Atlanta didn't create that. Right. It was that 1 hour that I sat and learned. When I think about like different career experiences that I've had, like on the job learning is something that I think hasn't been prioritized as much in the past as maybe it is now. Right. And I think that's what's beginning to rise. I think education is going to shift. I think on-demand learning and on-the-job experience is going to become much more acknowledged and respected than it has been traditionally. And I talk a lot about this. I've got a podcast called Urban Girl Corporate World. You'd be surprised at like what I had a CISO who went to school for women's studies. Right? The head of risk and security at TikTok, she went to school for finance. She was a former Wall Streeter too, right? But as leaders, it gives us so many different lenses. And that's what I really love about working with IANS as faculty. So IANS is a service that organizations can subscribe to, and they provide a ton of support in different ways. So they've got forums and conferences and online classes, but they have this service called Ask an Expert. And essentially you can look across any cybersecurity domain. We've got about 85 to 100 faculty, typically CISO or CISO directs. And you can spend an hour on the phone with this professional expert and talk about anything. I have helped CISOs look at their strat plans, develop security awareness programs, help government agencies enhance their third-party risk management programs, right? This is different from, again, they could go on LinkedIn Learning and get that foundational aspect, but they want the experience, right? And I think to your point, Tracy, that's what mentorship is about. Getting the firsthand perspective from somebody with experience, because theory is great, but execution is so much better. And, what I'm able to share is, hey, I've done that before, or, oh, you're thinking about doing this? Well, I did that and it flopped. And here's why. Here's what you need to be mindful of. And that's what I find really, really special about that offering with IANS.
I think you're going to see, to the point you just made, the education system is changing. Higher education. One of my besties is a tenured professor, and we talk about this all the time, how it changed with the GI Bill, how it's changing now. But we are always going to need, especially in STEM, we're always going to need those researchers. We're always going to need the theorists. So the theorists won't go away.
Right.
But we also don't need everybody to be a theorist. So how do we move towards the type of education that you're talking about, which is relevant to where we are now, based on experience, but relevant to what's happening right now, with those theorists helping us to get smarter and stronger as we go. I think we're going to see a big change in the number of students that are, looking at four-year degrees for different reasons.
I agree.
I remember even before, the pandemic, there was a big push to get people doing trades, going back into the trades, because everybody was in college, so nobody could actually unplug a toilet, basically. So, now with the pandemic, we have all these people who have gone on and done a lot of online learning, gotten certifications, and recognizing that I hope I just didn't waste 3 years of college money in, learning something that quite literally the last 6 months or the last 9 months, going online and really hyper-focusing what I'm looking at, what I'm learning about, is helping me in my career more than my 4-year degree ever did. So I agree with you 100% that the education system as we know it is changing. The traditional 4-year degree probably is going to be going away. And between you and me, I hope it happens within the next 6 years, because I'm sitting on a really fat 529 account that I would like to use that money to buy a summer home or something like that.
I don't think it's ever going to go away, but I think we're going to see it return to a more pure sense. We need now. I'm an advocate of the liberal arts programs where, we teach people how to think. I'm also a big advocate of non-traditional education. It can be on the job. It can be through, boot camps that you take. It can be through LinkedIn Learning. We just have to help with the corporate America to think about the diversity of the education itself and to be more accepting of it. That's the pivot point that we're at right now. As I've been in some interviews where people have, where we're interviewing and I've had to kind of mute out and say, guys, they don't have that, but that's okay. Are you not listening to the story? Right? Are you not listening to the story? So now
I agree with that.
Nicole, do you also, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I was going to ask you if you also, you're mentoring adults in a formal setting with IONS. Are you also still mentoring with some of the other outreach groups that you were working with before?
Yeah, so I typically, kind of the first priority for mentorship that I get now are my students, right? Okay. So that go through my lecture series, just because I'm finding quite naturally, you have like that top 20% of your students that really, really like are excellent and really engage the content and then really take it to practice. And a lot of them, because my course is MBA level, a lot of them are, really starting, or management level or supervisory level in their careers. And, bringing in that people aspect is a totally different ball game than just being a tactical executor. I also speak a lot at conferences. My podcast has an online community of about 800 women from all over the world where we talk about, different things about our experiences as women in the workplace. And then, this industry is so small. And we're just circles of people intersecting. And so there's always, different CISOs who are starting mentoring circles and they may want you to meet someone and meet someone else. So a lot of it is very organic, but I am very intentional about connecting with professionals on the rise and like the next generation of professionals, because every single fantastic opportunity I have had, 9 times out of 10 is going to be because of a mentor or somebody who sponsored me or spoke up for me. So I feel obligated to pay it forward. There's no possible way.
I agree. I think, where we go in our lives from a career perspective has a lot to do with the influence that other people have on us and as well as the influence that we have on other people. So I would be loath to be able to count on one hand how many experiences or how many opportunities I got by answering an ad in the newspaper or online. The best ones have always been, I know somebody who's looking for this person. I think you'd be perfect for the job. So, and I think again that kind of goes back to that being your authentic self conversation, because these people know who you are. They know what you're capable of doing, and they know what you can bring to an organization. And I think that can only be had by developing these relationships, whether it's with the people you're mentoring or who are mentoring you. Or even just people who you're working with on a day-to-day basis. I always think it's best to bring your authentic self to whatever you do, and that can pay off in spades.
Agree.
Now, Nicole, you do a lot of mentoring, but let me turn the question a little bit. Did you have mentors? Are there people that you're like, it hadn't been for Joe or Sally or Mary or who any stories you can share with us there?
Yes there.
Uh-huh.
Man, there are so many stories I can share. I'm going to share. So I was at a tech conference once, and there, even now, but even more so years ago, there are very few women, right, in attendance. And so I am a complete introvert. And so after I engage with people, lots and lots of people, I need to take a break and just kind of like replenish. So if you're at a tech conference, the best place to take a break as a woman is the women's lounge, because nobody else is going to be in there. So I'm at the women's lounge, and I'll never forget this, in the St. Regis in Atlanta, and I'm just hanging out, being an introvert on my phone. And in walks a woman who was on the stage earlier. And I had really admired what she spoke about. And I had said to myself, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to talk to her before the day is over. But again, I'm in like relaxed introvert mode. I'm like, we're in the restroom. That's so weird. I'm not going to talk to her. And I just kind of left it alone. And she came back and she was like, oh my God, you're an introvert too. I'm like, yes, my people. And so we just started talking, and I mentioned some things that she had spoke about earlier. And she was just like, oh my goodness, we just have to stay connected. And we have. She has been so instrumental to my growth in the industry, right? I ended up changing jobs sometime after. She helped me think through, which options to take, which aligned and why, right? The industry is small. I know this leader. I know that person. Oh, you need to meet such and such, right? Like if I really trace it back, my opportunity at Riot kind of goes back to her and some folks that she connected me with some time ago. And her name's Olivia Rose. She's a CISO at Amplitude. She is just phenomenal and fantastic. And I strive and hope to be half of what she was to me, to many others, because literally mentors have changed my life. Another one is Trina Ford, who's the CISO at AEG. When I was first thinking about coming into tech, she was the chief business security officer at my then company. And I reached out to her and I was like, I'm not sure, but I'm really interested. And she was like, I think you would be good. You should interview, right? Just getting that nod of approval or getting that push, it makes so much of a difference. And I these are women that I call on often for advice, for perspective. And they're just fabulous. And I only can imagine what challenges they had to overcome to get where they are, right? And so I'm really grateful to have amazing women like that in my space, in my circle.
And do you have any mentors? Go ahead, Charlene, please.
I was just going to say, it sounds like they were all organic.
Mentoring, they weren't set up, it's just like you click with somebody or you don't.
And if you click with somebody, then
those are the best relationships to have, because you know each other.
You know where your strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah.
Sorry,
a lot
go
of people
ahead.
try to force it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I love the idea of mentoring programs, and I love them when they work, but I really do think that the best mentors are the ones who you actually kind of find on your own, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, have all of your mentors been women? And the reason I ask that is that when I look back over my career, a lot of my career, I've been the only woman in the room. Mm-hmm. So one of the most impactful mentors to me was a fellow by the name of Scott Barr, and he was the wind beneath my wings. He just said, no, you are this, go and do this. And he would open doors, not literally open the doors. He would open the door of opportunity and say, you need to charge through that. And we would talk it through. And I know that I would not be where I am right now had he not, looked at this person a couple of years younger and said, but what are you doing over there being quiet? Get up here at the table.
Yeah. So they have not all been women. One of my favorite and most impactful mentors was a man, Steve Chiono. I was working in audit and I audited him. And I think he was just really impressed with my preparedness, my executive presence. And he told me, he said, if you ever need anything, let me know. And I was like, okay, I'm going to call you. And I called him, right? And he helped me navigate some of at that point, some of the biggest decisions that I had in my career. And what I loved about Steve is that, first of all, legal is much like cyber or audit. It's a service to the business, right? So he has a perspective of how you have to position your offerings in order to get buy-in, right? How to effectively manage relationships and rapport, which is something that I might not get from another business leader because, right, they are income driving. What I also liked about him, he would always, sometimes, like, I was so young and like so ambitious, and he would just say, Nicole, get out of my office. Like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Right. And I love the candor, because sometimes you need to tell super young, ambitious kids, like, a lot of things are timing, not now. And I can't imagine, had I taken some of these opportunities that were just crazy, it would have rerouted my path. But having someone to ground me and tell me when I'm absolutely nuts, but then motivate me and push me. And what I love most, and I say I love most because I love so much about Steve, he never tried to make a decision for me. He helped me think through the consequences and downstream impact of my options. And that is a great mentor.
That absolutely is. Don't tell me what to do. I may ask you for a little bit more guidance than what you're giving me right now. I may say, let's role play a little bit, but don't tell me what to do, and teach me, help me figure it out. I love it. I love it.
That is great. So you're actually keynoting at RSA this year, right?
Yes, I'm so excited. I am really
Tell us
excited
about that. How did that come about?
So RSA, I mean, that's like the godfather of the tech conferences. And I remember when I first got in tech, one of my peers had presented at RSA, and I was just like, wow, it seems so big, so far, so great. And it's like, I want to do that one day, because I really, really love speaking, and I love speaking about tech. And I love speaking about being a woman in tech. So when I saw the open call for RSA, I was like, you know what? I'm going to throw my name in the hat. And I did, and it worked. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be on the C-suite track. And I'm going to be talking about how your business information security officers are your cybersecurity secret weapon. It's a new emerging role in the industry, right? Many companies are starting to build this into their teams, their leadership teams. But I don't know that a lot of organizations know how to best leverage them. And so I think by helping them understand how to unlock all of the benefits and juice that come with the BSO, I think it can really help take organizations and their cybersecurity programs to another level.
That is awesome. I wish you the best of luck with that. That's going to be a great discussion. And do you have other folks who are going to be speaking there with you, or are you doing it all by yourself?
So I'm doing a solo presentation by myself. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see you there. I am hoping to make it there. It's hanging in the balance right now, but it would be fun to connect. It would be fun to connect.
Listen, we won't be hard to find. I'll have purple hair. You'll have pink hair. Right?
That's right. I'm the boring one with the gray hair, so.
No, all colors and coalitions. We'll be doing it. We will be doing it. So, as we've been talking about mentoring, I mentioned this to Charlene earlier. I try to really tailor where I spend my time, not to be stingy with it, but it's very easy to bleed out by just wanting to be too many things to too many people. I noticed a trend across years that you're not necessarily at the food pantry, but you are, and I don't mean that as a negative. I mean, you're figuring out, how do you get the most bang for the buck? How do you take the things that you're doing during the day? It looks like you're using that as a way to kind of tailor where you're mentoring and how you're leaning in. Is that fair to say? I mean, give some guidance to those listening on how do you figure out where to mentor, where to build community, where to invest your time with the extracurriculars that are tangential to career.
Yeah. I think that the first thing is being intentional, right? And being self-aware. It's like, and it starts with your own journey. Everything that I pour into people is motivated by what I wish I knew then, right? Like, I strive to be the person that I needed then. And I think that begins to lay the roadmap for the communities you engage in, the perspective that you hope to share, right? And so I think another big thing too is you can't be everything to everybody. Pardon me. So it's about carving out time for that specifically. So for me, I typically will take mentoring calls one day a week, and I'll block off, maybe 3 or 4 hours, right? But I also, and maybe it's not necessarily mentoring, because when I say maybe it is, because I see mentoring as more of like a long-term relationship building, right? But sometimes, and I think there has to be a finite amount of that, because if I'm going to mentor 50 people, I'm going to give them just a tiny bit. I think they deserve more. So I'm more than willing to have a 30-minute conversation, and talk to somebody, go through things and chat through things and pressure test things and brainstorm. Right. But there's going to be a reduced few that I really am going to connect with and carry through that process. I remember I had a mentor once, and she said, I do this for 1 year. And I was like, you know what? I love that, because it's like, we've got stuff to accomplish. We set goals up front. We check in and we make sure that we're on the right path. And if we're not seeing results, we change courses. But again, I think it's all about carving out time, being intentional, being selective, both the mentor and the mentee, understanding what it is that you have to offer and what that's anchored in and rooted in, and just finding your people. And some of it is trial and error, right? You don't get it right every time, but you've just got to start somewhere, and it will all.
Well, you've mentioned that there were some very intentional mentoring relationships where you have goals that are set, and so it's more formal. But there's also another side of it that you hit on, which is there are accidental or unintentional or casual mentoring that happens. Both are really valuable. I do have women that reach out who want soundbite guidance, which eventually turns into a little bit more. But you're right. You kind of have to limit that, because that seagull opinions that are provided without getting to understand them and know the context of their life force, right? What's their spark? What's their essence? I can give them some generalities that they might be able to Google, they might be able to find in a book. So the formality, did you find that the formality, making sure that you set goals with a mentor, helped as well?
I think even in the casual mentorships, there's still a little bit of formality in there, because I'm not going to set up time with, somebody that I admire just to shoot the breeze, it doesn't make sense. But there are spaces for that. Right. But if I'm going to take an hour or 30 minutes or 45 minutes out of your day, I want to make it worth my while. Right. And so I think there's always, we always have things that we're working towards. Right. And some of those goals are big. Some of those goals are small, all relevant. But I think making sure that when you get access to this person with this knowledge and perspective that you want to pull from, you make the most of that time, because time is the most valuable thing that we have. And, some personalities lean towards they need that structure, right? Some people for the time, they need that structure. On the other side, some personalities like it a little bit more fluid. And if that's what works, go for it. But I think within both, we've got to be intentional in what we're hoping to gain and what we're hoping to give.
Thank you for that. I learn something every time we have a conversation, every time that we engage in one of these with any of the guests that we've had. Charlene, I think we're running a little bit low on time.
We only have a couple of minutes left. So I want to actually close with one question, and maybe we can just kind of think about it if we can't actually answer it here. But what is the one thing that you wish you had done differently in your career?
Not second guess myself. Just go for it. Worrying is a waste of time. It's a waste of time. Either you win or you learn, right? So, winners never quit and quitters never win. So just keep going. If I would have just kept, I would have probably saved everybody so much time, including myself.
That is great advice. I actually recently read something that somebody said something to the effect of, you can't run the race before it starts. You can't worry about things that you really don't have any control over. So
I love that. I love that. Stop second guessing.
Just live your life, in the best way possible. So I think it's great. Nicole, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, just for being so awesome. We really do appreciate your being on Tech Strong Women. It was a great conversation. I sure hope you'll come back and join us again on a future episode.
Absolutely. Thank you, lady. Charlene Tracy, you are amazing. And I love this platform and what you're doing.
Well, thanks, guys.
You.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We've got lots more Tech Strong TV coming up, so stay tuned. All right, we are back. Next up, we have The Lab with Brendan O'Leary. Brendan is from GitLab. He's the senior developer evangelist, if you don't know Brendan already. But he comes on once a month or so and gives us the updates on what's happening with GitLab and their technology. So it's a great update. So let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hello, friends, and welcome to The Lab, a monthly show where we look at the latest and greatest developments in software development, DevOps, and the cloud. I'm your host, Brendan O'Leary, and for those who don't know me, I'm a developer evangelist based on the East Coast of the United States. I work at GitLab, which means I get to talk to a lot of amazing folks throughout the software engineering space about what it really means to get code shipped to production. This is our monthly show where we talk about those advancements, and we also talk about the latest release from GitLab. As you may or may not know, GitLab released every month on the 22nd, and this past 22nd did not disappoint. GitLab 14.8 was released, and there's a lot of really cool features in here, a lot focused around security, and a lot focused around planning of DevOps stages. So kind of both ends of the DevOps pipeline or life cycle, if you will. And so I'm really excited about a lot of these. One, I wrote a blog about, and so I guess I probably have to start off with that one, which is the new ability to have new SSH key types. And with that, also some new security approval policies. So first of all, for the SSH key types, you can now have your U2F device or FIDO device, like a YubiKey, can now be used to authenticate your presence against your SSH key when using that to authenticate to GitLab. And this is really great because, of course, the SSH key is a nice way to do machine-to-machine authentication, but adding that layer, that second layer of authentication with a physical device that you have in your possession, make sure that it's not going to be used or abused for some other, by some other party. So I'm really excited about this. That's kind of like one place in my life that I didn't quite have two-factor auth yet is like, oh, well, my SSH key is kind of a single factor, but now I've got the ability to have two-factor auth. So I'm really excited about that. The also kind of along with this two-step process and related is the new security approval policies. So security approvals is what we've used to kind of replace this vulnerability checking feature. So they're similar, that both require approvals for an MR that contain a security vulnerability. Security approvals let that experience get improved in a number of ways. First of all, they allow users to edit the security approval rules to create and chain multiple rules together so that you can filter based on severity thresholds for the given security scanner. And you can also add a two-step approval process to enforce it for any desired changes to the security rules themselves and apply a single set of security policies to multiple projects at once. So this is great and will allow people to maintain a single centralized security rule set and also secure the rule set itself. So I think that's really exciting. In addition, kind of in the same vein, there's new audit events provided on the group level to have group level audit events page for anyone that might be doing user impersonation. This used to only be available to GitLab SaaS customers, but we've now got this available both for self-managed and for SaaS. So we're really excited about that. We also introduced, if we're going again to the front of the DevOps lifecycle, additional process tracking capabilities to our roadmap. So you can now view how the percentage complete of epics, based on that issue count instead of just weight. So you used to be able to do it with weight. Now you can do it with either weight or issue count. So this is useful for organizations that might use kind of like a Kanban or methodology where every issue isn't necessarily weighted against one another, but we want to count just each issue as it's completed. We also added auto-completion of our CI/CD keywords to the pipeline editor. So the pipeline editor, for those who don't know, is the new way to interact with and edit your pipeline directly from within GitLab. And so now there's a little bit of autocomplete there that'll help you, be more efficient when you're writing or debugging or changing a pipeline. So that's kind of exciting. We also added the number of deployments and deployment frequency to our DORA metrics page that's underneath of CI/CD analytics. And so this is great because this data was previously available in value stream analytics, but we want to have that data all centralized to one place for the DORA metrics so that you can really understand the DORA 4 and how your team is performing against them. Another improvement is that group owners can now delete a group and its subgroups at the parent level just in one place. So it's not hard. You don't have to go delete all the subgroups first. It's kind of just a nice to have. And also you can add default issues and merge request templates into a project repository. So if you set the default templates in the GitLab directory of the repository there's the .gitlab directory, but you set default.md, that will now set the default template for any issue or merge request when a new one's created. So that's really helpful. Now, something we've talked about before, but I want to spend some more time talking about today is contributing to GitLab. As many of you know, GitLab is an open source project. It's MIT licensed, our open source core is, and we want to make it as easy as possible for folks that are using GitLab to then become GitLab contributors. And so we've got a brand new contribution guide to help you get started. It has step-by-step instructions to how to contribute to the development or the documentation or the translation of GitLab into other languages or the design of GitLab. And diversity, inclusion, and belonging is one of our values. We want to create a welcoming community for every contributor. And so you can also see our code of conduct page to learn more about our commitment to having an open and welcome environment where everyone can contribute. And if you need any help while you're contributing to GitLab, there's a lot of resources that are available to you. There's a Gitter channel for contributors where you can ask questions, and it's monitored by our staff. We've got merge request coaches. Those are folks that are on our engineering team who are specifically designated themselves as able to help community members coach them through getting their merge requests merged. You can go to the GitLab team page and look for merge request coach, or you can mention at gitlab-org/coaches in any merge request comment to ping all of them. You can also find reviewers and maintainers of GitLab projects in our handbook. So if you're working on a specific feature for a specific area, in the part of our handbook that talks about that area, you'll find who are the reviewers, who are the maintainers, who's the product manager for that area, so that you can mention them in GitLab if you have a question or a concern to bring up with them. And also, of course, if you have just a feature idea or question, you can, of course, search through our existing issues. Those are all public, or create a new issue if you can't find one already that matches what you're looking for. And then again, you can mention that product team member that handles that part of GitLab directly in that, so that they can see it and take a look at your idea. And finally, if you have any other questions or feedback, you of course can always reach out to me, but you also can reach out to contributors@gitlab.com, and they'll get back to you. Our team is monitoring that all the time. Okay, and then just to wrap up GitLab 14.8 and our show today, I want to talk about some littler changes, but ones that caught my eye and I think are really important for our community and our users. First is you can use the CI lint API with other branches or tags. So you can add a parameter to the endpoint. You can lint the CI configuration that's in a different branch than the main branch, or in a tag ref, so you can understand what problems might exist there. You can also do coverage-guided fuzz testing and manage the corpus of those things. So now that corpus management is integrated directly into security and compliance configuration section. There's a variable that you can say, use the registry true and set a GitLab token, and that will then easily integrate into your testing workflow. And the corpus files can be added to the registry automatically from pipelines as coverage-guided test fuzz tests are run. You can also then automatically update those with the artifacts of the output of that coverage-guided fuzz test job, rather than only just manually updating them. And if a corpus is no longer needed, you can delete it directly from that registry page as well, or download the files associated to inspect them elsewhere. Of course, with every GitLab release, there's also a GitLab Runner release. And in GitLab Runner 14.8, we're really excited for a lot of new improvements in security and continuous integration improvements. So I'd love you to take a look at that. And another thing related to Verify and the runner is the ability to customize the built-in SAST and secret detection rules. So you can now define custom and predefined rules that had been previously included in the GitLab static application security testing, or SAST, and secret detection areas. So then for each rule, you can change the name, what message comes back, the description, and the severity field, so that your teams can understand, which vulnerabilities are most critical based on your environment. So this is also in addition to the, existing customization options that already existed that you could disable or replace or extend a predefined rule. You can now actually edit those predefined rules directly yourselves. And those customizations will then be reflected in the reports, right? The SAST report that comes out, or the secret detection report that comes out of GitLab, and that's available in all GitLab tiers. And then with GitLab Ultimate, those customizations are also available when you're looking at them in the merge request approval rules and showing them in the vulnerability report. So we talked a little bit earlier about those changes and updates to the merge request approval rules. Those can now leverage your customized details around SAST and secret detection. Well, great. I think you can agree with me that that's the best release ever of GitLab. We're really excited to bring it to you. Right around the corner is going to be GitLab 15, and we have a lot of really exciting things coming there. Stay tuned to the lab for that, and stay tuned to Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at O'Leary Crew, and follow GitLab at GitLab, as you can see more things coming out around GitLab 15. Twitter is where I spend most of my time. So if you have an idea for a future episode or want to discuss anything from today's episode in more detail, I'd love to chat with you there. And again, the lab is produced monthly, so we'll see you next month after the next GitLab release. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next month in the lab. Stay safe.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we've got our Something Old segment. This is from the recent Predict 2022 event. This one features Carrie Perlson, who is with MIT. She is with the CAMS Research Consortium, and the topic of her presentation is 2022 is the year to build a cybersecurity culture. So she shares her research with the MIT Sloan School's research group, and she discusses some ways in which malicious actors are trying to steal money and company data and infiltrate systems. She also offers up some best practices for organizations as they try to build up a more cybersecurity aware culture within their organization. Good stuff. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hello, I'm Dr. Carrie Perlson. I am the executive director of a research group at MIT called Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan. We look at the managerial and organizational and business aspects of cybersecurity. I'm delighted to be here with you today to talk about my prediction for 2022. I believe this is the year of a cybersecurity culture. I'm going to take you through just a couple of slides here to talk about why I think this is the year of cybersecurity culture and what that means for you and your organization. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that cybersecurity is a big concern. We all remember when Facebook had a breach just a short couple of years ago. But if you're a Words with Friends player, you probably remember Zynga also being breached when 200 million Words with Friends players' information was exposed on the web just in 2019. If you're a Marriott guest, you probably saw this hack with 5.2 million guests' information accessed back in March and April 2022. Those of us that are fans of Honda or Jack Daniel might be interested to know that there was ransomware for those two companies in 2022. And all of us remember this hack from Twitter when some famous people's accounts like Elon Musk were hacked and people were offered 2,000 Bitcoin if you send them 1,000 Bitcoin. Actually, $2,000 in Bitcoin if you send them $1,000 in Bitcoin. Why would rich people do this? Well, the hackers had an answer for that too. They said, well, we're just wealthy individuals and we know everybody's struggling with the pandemic. So we just want to make your life a little easier. And believe it or not, a lot of people sent in $1,000 in Bitcoin. More recently, about this time last year, we all learned that our supply chains are now vulnerable to attack with the SolarWinds fiasco that happened. And of course, many of us were impacted by Microsoft's email software hack last March. And for those of you following the news, there's a new one that is being dubbed the most serious cybersecurity breach ever, unfolding right now, December and January. And this one we're calling the Log4j vulnerability, which impacts Java code virtually every website around. So most companies are experiencing many security events. The statistic says that each company handles about 200,000 security events a day, people knocking on the door, bots knocking on the door, trying to get into our systems. The fact that you don't see more breaches is really testament to how great our technologies are. However, our technologies can't do everything. It only takes one breach to get into our systems to wreak havoc. So my colleague at MIT, Professor Madnick, likes to say there's really only two types of organizations, those that know they've been attacked and those that don't yet know they've been attacked. Now, this last few years, we've all been impacted by COVID-19. But in our world, in our work world, it's created the perfect storm of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and chaos. People working from home, people going back to the office. We don't have our usual support systems for making sure that emails and the things that we're looking at are actually valid. And so many people have experienced cybersecurity breaches. In fact, statistics show there have been more cybersecurity breaches in the last 18 months than in the previous 18 months before that, simply because people are clicking on more things than they should, and the bad guys know this. The bad guys have upped their game, so it's time that we do the same. With us working from home and now starting to return to work and maybe back at home because of the new Omicron virus, keeping ourselves, our families, and our organizations secure has never been more urgent or more important. As I mentioned, the technologies can only keep us partially safe. They can keep us pretty secure for all the things that they know about, but the bad guys are always coming up with new ways to get into our organizations and our systems. Turns out 90% or so of breaches start because of some type of human error. People click on the wrong website, people open an email that they shouldn't have opened, people open a bad file. And of course, the bad guys are always finding new ways into our system, especially now through our supply chain. People, as I said, are perhaps the biggest vulnerability today. This is a picture of an email that looks like it's from PayPal, has these big blue words that say response required, and it goes on to talk about how your account needs some attention. But it turns out that this is phishing. This is not a real email. Most people don't think that cybersecurity is part of their jobs, and the cyber criminals have capitalized on this. So, of course, phishing is the most common way for the malicious actors to get into our systems, to steal our credentials, to open backdoors, and to basically wreak havoc. So we need a cybersecurity culture that has multi-dimensions that helps us keep ourselves and our organizations secure. Now, at MIT, we asked this question: how can we create a culture of cybersecurity in our organizations? And our research suggests that we do that by figuring out how to align the values, attitudes, and beliefs of security with the behaviors we want to drive in our organization. Let me tell you a little bit more about what I mean by that. First of all, we have this maturity model. We'd like to see everybody at what we call level 4, where everybody in the organization thinks security is part of their job. It turns out that's just not the case in most organizations. Most organizations are in one of these other 3 levels. They either think the technology will take care of it, they think their cybersecurity professionals will take care of security, they think maybe their managers will tell them what to do. But it turns out that no matter how good we are at level 1, 2, and 3, we really need everybody to be thinking about cybersecurity at some level. You don't have to be an expert, and you don't have to make everyone in your organization an expert. But everybody has to be just enough aware so that if something fishy looks strange to them, some email looks odd, that they report it, or that at least they don't click on it. So this is our model of building a cybersecurity culture. And I'm going to take you through this model, but very high level, we want to drive cybersecure behaviors. That's the box on the right-hand side. We think cybersecure behaviors are driven by values, attitudes, and beliefs. That's the culture. And the values, attitudes, and beliefs are driven by external influences and managerial mechanisms. Those are the things that we can do something about. Let me talk a minute about behaviors. We want to drive cybersecure behaviors. We don't want people clicking on phishing emails. We don't want people opening files that shouldn't be opened. We would love people in our organization to raise stories, to share stories of things they've read in the news so that we shine light on cybersecurity incidences that are happening outside our organization and make sure that they don't happen inside our organization. I'm sure you can think of lots of different behaviors you want to drive, or particularly behaviors you want to make sure don't happen within your organization. Now, those behaviors happen because people value those behaviors. They have attitudes towards security, and they believe security is important. Now, we see this kind of culture happen at 3 levels. Leaders can help us shape our values, attitudes, and beliefs simply by things they do and things they say. If a leader in an organization makes cybersecurity a priority, and what leader wouldn't want to make cybersecurity a priority, and they demonstrate that it's their priority, then that can go a long way towards creating the values, attitudes, and beliefs that we need in our organizations. Let me give you an example. In one company that we studied, it's a bank in Brazil, actually. The CEO leads almost every all-hands meeting with a cybersecurity moment. He starts the meeting with either a story, or he brings up a cybersecurity professional to talk about something that everybody can relate to, or he talks about a personal situation that he encountered. And just the mere fact that he starts every meeting with his entire company with a cybersecurity moment sends the message that cybersecurity is important to him. And you know what? If it's important to him, it trickles down. It becomes a value for the organization. People have attitudes that are consistent with their CEO's attitude of security being important. Let me give you another example. In an insurance company we studied, one of the C-level executives was allowed himself to be part of their cybersecurity awareness program. And he personally stepped up and played different characters in the little videos that they built. Now, this is a little bit of tongue in cheek, a little bit of fun, but by this executive letting himself be part of the message, he was also sending the message to the organization that cybersecurity is important around here, and we need to make sure that we all do something about it. So leaders play an important role. Second of all, we see the culture in the way groups interact with each other. If the security people interact with normal other employees in the company on a daily basis, just to kind of be there and talk about security and be there to answer questions about security, that's how groups can support each other. If groups give presentations to each other about cybersecurity things that they've seen, then we start to see cybersecurity values, attitudes, and beliefs in action at the group level. And of course, at the individual level, we see the values, attitudes, and beliefs of an organization by the actions that individuals take. If you make it possible for individuals to be secure, they're more likely to feel that they should be secure, and then they're more likely to do those behaviors. I'll give you an example there. Many companies have installed a virtual button on their email system. So if an employee gets an email that looks suspicious, they don't have to wonder what to do with it. They just click a button on their browser, and that email is sent off to the cybersecurity team to evaluate to see if it's a phishing email or not. That empowers individuals, and that empowerment enables individuals to feel that cybersecurity is something more important to them and something they can do something about. So you can see the culture in action in an organization, and that culture is what drives the behaviors we're trying to drive. Now, the values, attitudes, and beliefs are driven by external influences, things like what industry are you in? If you're financial services, for example, or if you're in healthcare, then you're already in an industry where there is a high value placed on information. Nobody's going to do business with a bank they don't trust. Nobody's going to do business with a hospital if they're worried their medical records are going to get out. So there's something built into those industries already. That's the kind of external influence that will influence the values, attitudes, and beliefs. Likewise, the country that you're in, the culture of the physical location of your organization, perhaps the regulations that are going on in your industry, those will all influence values, attitudes, and beliefs. But frankly, as a manager, we don't have a lot of control over that. We do have control over a number of other mechanisms, however, and that's the box I've highlighted in this slide. I call those managerial mechanisms. We can do things like train people, have awareness programs. Many organizations do that. They have awareness programs where they try to let people in the organization know that cybersecurity is important. But frankly, awareness programs aren't enough, and training programs aren't enough. They're just a baseline. They let us know what's important, but they don't actually seem to change the values, attitudes, and beliefs very well. I mean, how many times have you done a training program on your computer while you're reading your email on your cell phone, or while you're playing games on your cell phone? I mean, honestly, a lot of people do the training they have to do because they have to get that box checked. So that's just not enough. It's important, and I'm not saying don't do it, but it's not going to actually change the values, attitudes, and beliefs. We need things like rewards, perhaps consequences for clicking on phishing emails. Let me give you some examples there. One organization we worked with is a industrial environment, and they have a lot of systems that are connected to the network and to perhaps the internet. We call those cyber physical systems. And if those systems get breached, then you can blow up stuff. You can actually have physical damage, possibly even harm to physical life. And one environment we looked at, they can't take a chance on that. So if an employee clicks on a phishing email the first time, they're taken to a training program to remind them not to do that. If they click on it a second time, then they meet with somebody from the organization who reminds them not to do that. If they click on a phishing email and a phishing test, the third time they meet with their manager, the fourth time with HR, the fifth time they're given a final warning. And if they continue to click on a phishing email in their phishing test, they're fired. I can tell you that organization has very few people that click on phishing emails more than once. So there you have it, consequences. Now that might not work in your organization, and I understand that. But if you don't have consequences for the behaviors that are damaging to your environment, then you're just not sending the right message about how important it is to do the right behaviors. Other organizations reward good behaviors. Many organizations have badges that you can put on your email that show that you're a defender of the organization, or you're a security a ninja, or many other kinds of titles that they can give you. Other organizations have gone to physical rewards, little trinkets or something, a t-shirt or a hat, or other kinds of physical things you can hand out that show people that they've done something right or something good or kept the environment secure. One organization we looked at, the cyber evangelist, gave out cookies. I don't mean the kind that you put on your computer. I mean the chocolate chip kind. And he ran out of cookies so fast, he couldn't believe it. He gave cookies to people who were demonstrating cyber secure behaviors. So people would go to great lengths just to get a chocolate chip cookie. Of course, we were all in the office at that point. But it shows you the power of a reward, not necessarily an expensive reward, but just rewarding behavior, shining light on the positive behaviors. Another managerial mechanism we can put in place is in our performance evaluation. If you reward people for doing cyber secure behaviors that you want to encourage, you're going to see more of them. For example, one organization has built into their performance evaluation people who have given little talks on things that they've read in the newspaper or seen in the news or their friends experienced. And by bringing those stories to the organization, they get rewarded for it in their performance evaluations. Another managerial mechanism is through assigning somebody to own building a culture. Another organization we worked with did this, and that evangelist was actually a marketing person. How brilliant was that? Because, of course, building a culture of cybersecurity is about changing hearts and minds. And what better person to do that than somebody with marketing experience? Marketing people are, by training, know how to change attitudes and values and beliefs. And so in this organization, the evangelist was able to put a number of things in place in terms of marketing campaigns, way more than just awareness programs and training programs, but to build in fun activities, to build in other motivations to actually get their organization to understand that it's not just about keeping the business secure, it's about the importance of cybersecurity personally and professionally. So there are a number of managerial mechanisms you can put in place. Now, our model explodes into a number of different boxes. This is the academic way to look at it, of course. And I don't expect you to take away the whole model in just our short talk today. But on this slide, I've given you a link to our website at MIT, and you're welcome to download the paper that goes through this idea and gives lots of examples if you're interested. Our website is cams.mit.edu. And if you go to the research page, you can find several papers that will talk about building a culture of cybersecurity. Okay, so let me conclude with a call to action. What can you do today to build better culture, to build a culture of cybersecurity? First of all, you can model the values, attitudes, and beliefs you want from those around you. Remember the story of the executive who started his meetings with cybersecurity moments? He's modeling how important cybersecurity is to him, and that has an impact in the organization. You can make heroes out of those who do things that protect your digital assets. Show them that it's one of your priorities, and it'll become their priority too. You can share ideas at the next meeting that you have. If you highlight cybersecurity in your meetings, even the highest level of discussion, could be any of the stories we started this talk with, or it could be the latest news headline on cybersecurity. What you're doing is shining light on the importance of security. And you know what? The bad guys thrive, and all the chaos and the fear and the doubt and the uncertainty, you can shine a light on them to stop that. Update. This is my favorite thing you can do. Most of us hate those updates. When you get a little note that says that your system needs to be updated, I don't know about you, but for me, I just get worried. What else is going to change? They're probably going to remove my favorite feature of the application. But it turns out that most of these updates are really about closing vulnerabilities, removing vulnerabilities, closing holes. Many of them are designed to fix the cybersecurity vulnerabilities that have been discovered in their system. So install those updates. Don't click on websites or emails that you do not know well. If you do, contact your IT support people immediately so they can tell you what to do. There's a lot of stories going around about phishing emails that look like they're from our boss, and they're asking us to get gift cards and to send the gift card to the boss, which of course is not really to the boss, because the boss or the supervisor is unavailable at the moment and they need your help. Could you go to Walmart? Could you go to Best Buy? Could you go to Amazon, purchase these gift cards? You'll get reimbursed through the system, the business systems. And it turns out that they're false and they look like they're from your manager. So before you do anything that looks a little odd, something you've not been asked to do before, verify that it's really what you're supposed to do. And of course, don't click on those email links that are in your email unless you're sure it's the right link going to the right place. We need to prepare everyone for cyber attacks. Again, not to make them paranoid, not to make them cyber experts, but just to make them aware. Everybody needs to know what their role is, even if their role is simply to inform somebody else. You don't want to leave that to chance. Should somebody see something odd on their computer or on their laptop or on their cell phone or their iPad, you want them to report it. So even if that's the role that everybody in the organization has, that will go a great way to help building a culture of cybersecurity. You want to manage risk. What is your risk management plan? Are you just going to absorb the risk? If you do nothing, you've decided that your organization will just absorb any consequences that happen. Or will you mitigate the risk, put something in place to try to minimize the fact that it might happen? Additional layers of defense or additional managerial mechanisms? Or will you transfer that risk to an insurance company perhaps, or to a vendor or to some other organization that will be responsible for keeping you more secure and absorbing the costs of any breaches that you do have? You know, you need a risk management plan for your personal life also. If your personal information is stolen, do you have that in place? Have you thought about how to protect your passwords and your bank accounts and your credit cards and your credit history? You want to have a risk management plan for yourself in place also. And finally, you want to keep yourself aware. There are many, many, many sources besides the headlines to help you understand what's going on in the cyber world today. And on my next slide, I've listed quite a few of these. Again, you're welcome to have a copy of these slides and to use any of these links. They're all publicly available. Your FBI, local FBI, and then national FBI have some great links about cyber news. You could check out RCAM's website for the latest on managerial thinking about cybersecurity. Verizon does a breach report every year that's quite popular for the latest security trends. The government's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, has a lot of stuff on social engineering and how the latest malicious actors are trying to get into our organizations. And of course, my favorite journalist, Brian Krebs, publishes regular blog posts, perhaps a little bit more technical, on interesting security updates. So I recommend that you pick your favorite site and just kind of check it once in a while, maybe once every week or two, just to see what the latest is. Okay, that's my talk. I'm from Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan, or CAMS, a research group at the Sloan School of Management. We are a consortium of companies just like yours that look at cybersecurity businesses. And if this is of interest to you, we'd love to have you check us out and possibly join us. So reach out to me if you have any interest in following up with CAMS. And let's make 2022 the year of a cybersecurity culture. Thank you.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com is an article that discusses the importance of software usability testing. Keeping an eye on the bigger picture is important when doing just about anything, and this adage holds true when testing software as well. There's no doubt that the QA testing process for software is essential. But generally speaking, it doesn't always fully take into account the user perspective. And even though developers, designers, and testers all try to keep the end user in mind when building and testing, there is no true way to anticipate and test for the variability of actual user experience in the wild. This is why it is essential to consult actual users. Who'd have thought? That's where the process of usability testing comes in. Every organization should consider implementing the practice before a software product launch. This article outlines what usability testing is and how it can benefit organizations and their customers. And we look at the recent Log4j shell vulnerability and how it has impacted organizations' mindset around business security. It has been 4 months since the vulnerability was discovered. And due to the popularity and widespread use of the application, it very quickly rocketed to being a top priority for security operatives and administrators around the world. Within weeks, Apache had issued a patch for the vulnerability, accompanied with the highest severity rating of 10. This particular RCE vulnerability posed an enormous threat to affected organizations, given how widely used the application is across the globe. And it was a wake-up call for organizations of all sizes, for businesses that may have been lax with their attack prevention and risk mitigation strategies. Vulnerability and threat management is critical to defending against known and unknown weaknesses in an organization's infrastructure, and businesses should act immediately. This article is an overview of what the Log4j vulnerability is and ways in which organizations can protect themselves. All right, over on Container Journal, we look at Kubernetes security and infrastructure as code scanning. Security, efficiency, and reliability are among the most important concerns in the Kubernetes space. But because containerized workloads are not secure by default, Kubernetes security continues to be a top priority. Organizations looking to reduce security risk need to work intentionally. Kubernetes security is directly linked to the way containerized workloads are configured, managed, and deployed. When Kubernetes security is not addressed through best practices, along with well-considered governance and guardrails, critical areas such as cost optimization, performance, reliability, and efficiency are all effective. This article goes into detail the importance of containers and Kubernetes security and how infrastructure as code scanning can help improve the security posture of Kubernetes environments. And we look at 5 CNCF projects for streaming and messaging. Event-driven architecture is becoming more commonplace within cloud-native ecosystems. By focusing on events, services can automatically trigger additional functionality, reducing manual legwork and evolving the traditional request-response communication paradigm. In such streaming environments, services either subscribe to an event source or publish events for other services to listen to. Often, they conduct a combination of both actions. Connecting services in this manner can eliminate overfetching concerns. Streaming and events manager platforms such as Kafka, RabbitMQ, or NATS add a layer to a system of services, explicitly focusing on transmitting messages between services. This helps organizations and applications remain decoupled from another, yet still allows the ability to communicate in a common format. This article reviews 5 CNCF projects related to cloud-native streaming and messaging, which are helpful utilities to help you implement a publish-subscribe pattern in your service ecosystem. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we have the results of a survey by Checkpoint that shows cloud security is becoming an even greater need than ever before. 2+ years of remote work has shown how much organizations have come to rely on the cloud. In fact, studies show that by 2025, there will be more than 200 zettabytes of data storage, half of which will be in the cloud. But as more data is stored in the cloud, the more important cloud security becomes. Kind of makes sense. The Checkpoint survey shows security incidents are up 10% from the previous year. Misconfigurations are now the top security challenge for more than a quarter of respondents, well ahead of issues such as exposed data or account compromise. To meet this challenge, organizations are rethinking their cloud security priorities. According to the study, these priorities are automation, preventing misconfigurations, securing cloud apps, attracting and retaining qualified staff, and then achieving regulatory compliance. This article goes into some of the things organizations are dealing with from a cloud security perspective and ways they can reduce their pain points. Good stuff. All right, and finally, Concentric has launched a service that makes it easier to translate data and risk insights surfaced by the Semantic Intelligence Data Access Governance Platform into specific remediation, monitoring, and privacy management tasks. Concentric Exchange is the first anonymous sharing service that both simplifies and improves data security and access governance. It adds a service to Semantic Intelligence through which organizations can anonymously share the insights and risks used to implement data security and access policies. It is hosted on Concentric Mind, M-I-N-D, a deep learning as a service platform designed to facilitate secure and anonymous sharing. As a result, organizations can benefit from the expertise and experience of other Concentric customers to interpret risks and content signals, implement remediation activities, and classify sensitive data. Good stuff. All right, that's it for the webinars, or not for the webinars, for the headlines. That's it for today. Please check back with me on Monday. I will have a brand new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TechstrongTV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with David Williams, who is the VP of Product Strategy over at Quali. David, thank you so much for joining me. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Charlene. It's good to be here.
Excellent. Excellent. So lots of stuff going on in the world of DevOps these days. But one of the things that we have been hearing a lot more noise about is governance in DevOps. And especially with the just the insane amount of automation that's going on to help kind of speed up the processes. Obviously, it's can be pretty easy for things to kind of go off the rails. So want to kind of get a sense from you as to what you see happening in the space with respect to governance in DevOps and how we can kind of maybe move away from the herding cats mindset when it comes to governance.
Yeah, it's been a journey on DevOps. DevOps, when it was introduced many, many years ago as a concept, immediately aligned itself with Agile. So it became not only the ability to get things out, as continuously as possible, also as fast as possible. And so what happened is that at that time, things were very much managed. It was small teams doing lots of work. As enterprises started kicking in with DevOps becoming a serious strategic way of actually delivering applications to their consumers, the amount of people got involved grew. The amount of teams that were involved grew. Even though the DevOps philosophy was small teams, fast moving, application componentry, going out into the ether as fast as possible, it stopped being that quite a while ago and started becoming much more mainstream. So unfortunately, DevOps grew up a lot. And one of the things that became an issue was governance. And governance from that perspective wasn't really just about security, SOC 2 compliance and making sure that, your secrets are held and managed efficiently across the pipeline. But it was also around how do you understand what people are doing and what is the interaction that they're having and why are they having that interaction? And, basically it's a fragmentation challenge more than anything else. DevOps pipelines are fragmented. And so how do you get a control without inhibiting innovation? And how do you get visibility, having lots of teams that want to innovate in their own areas, but not necessarily give you that full end to end? So that's the challenge that, has emerged. And I think it's going to continue to do that for quite a while to come because the applications are getting bigger and more contention based in regards to infrastructure sharing. So governance is going to be the thing.
It's interesting because I think of it a lot like a company itself growing up there. When you have 2 or 3 people working in a company, it can be very difficult to get a lot achieved without everybody kind of going out all in. But as a company grows, you've got more people who are doing the work, but maybe they're not necessarily talking to each other, and not everybody has all the information they need. So, you kind of have to kind of build a technology or at least a process around being able to get the information out and helping everybody be on the same page. And it kind of sounds like the same thing is happening in the DevOps space with respect to just having a greater understanding and a greater, not just an understanding of the process, but just a better way of enabling the process from an understanding and a communication perspective, as well as just making sure that all the right things are getting done at the right time. So what do you guys propose? I mean, what do you see that you believe could make a real difference?
You use two words that always make me smile when I talk to DevOps. I used to be an analyst talking to a lot of DevOps practitioners, and the two words that used to run for the hills were process. That was one thing. And so they wanted collaboration, but they wanted to be able to collaborate without being governed in any way. So I think that process word is there, and anything to do with abstraction. So abstraction is not a good thing. It takes you away from the core. So what I'm saying to you is that any solution that enables you to get greater control on governance and understanding has got to be able to do it without impeding people's ability to do their jobs. And it's got to be something that is subsumed within their normal breathing in and out. It can't be something that's another job to do. That defeats the whole point of anything that's to do with lean practices about removing stuff. We're the software industry. So the way that we make things less complex is by adding something. That's the normal inclination. So we want to make sure that, I think DevOps, when you actually use it, whatever you add into the mix has got to be subsumed within your normal day-to-day activities. So it can't be yet another thing to do. It's got to be, for example, security has got to be there, but not intrusive. And that goes for why I came to Quali was because I'd spent a lot of time with companies where infrastructure, the ability to provision into the cloud, do all the things was becoming a bit of a mystery. People would assume infrastructure. So the governance around what you're deploying and how you're provisioning your infrastructure not only became fragmented through your pipelines, because each you plan something and then you code it, you build it, you release it. Each one of those and test it, etc. Each one of those is a very defined area. I wouldn't say it might be one person, it might be many teams, but each one of those is a very specific thing you have to do. But wouldn't it be cool if you could subsume testing into your code? Wouldn't it be cool if you could consume compliance with how you're coding? So you're coding and it's automatically looking at configurations and modifications and logging that appropriately without you having to add another layer. And I think the same with infrastructure. I think that the companies that I'd worked for before really didn't know what was going on. And I worked for DevOps companies that were trying to work out, okay, so the infrastructure was there, now it's gone, or it's there and now it's modified. Every commit that a coder does is, a point in time. So what has happened between that commit and the next commit? And so all these stages of infrastructure, how do you build that in? So at Quali, what we've really looked at is providing a method with which you can let people use infrastructure as code practices, configuration management tools, do what you need, but it gets automatically subsumed into a model. And that is something, and the model is what you rate on. That's what applies the policies around access and et cetera. But it should allow the coders, the release managers, the testers to do what they need, but also it provides a sort of like a control plane on top that enables you to talk and be governed, but without that big brother type of thing looking at you. So I think that's the magic about DevOps is if you add something in, it's got to be something that doesn't get in the way of speed. It's got to not provide another barrier. It's got to do these things. It's a hard problem to solve. Mm-hmm. But if you approach it in a way that assumes that people are going to do things, they're going to break stuff. People do that. That's what they do. They do their own stuff. They don't like being told what to do. So if you can provide as subliminal a level of control over infrastructure that says, I know how you're doing it. I'm now going to provide that same capabilities that we used in build to help the testers understand what to build. So now you're providing some consistency across using the control plane. So you're using your models and you're moving them across. but it subsumes what they already use. So you can add it in. Your infrastructure stack and the way that you deploy it is implemented in the model that has policy, access control, secrets integration. And so that's really the philosophy, is to make sure that we can provide that end-to-end capabilities, accelerate the delivery lifecycle, but not impede the practitioners from what they do, but provide the business with visibility, which they do not have today. So I would just finalize by saying cost isn't a governance thing, but unless you govern it and you understand why you're doing something, then how do you associate a cost of cloud if you can't associate it with a pipeline? At the moment, cost is associated with instances, and you're having to group that together. What if you could provide the model with a value and why you're doing it, the application that you're delivering on? And if you can do that, then you're subtly applying what they do at the practitioner level with an application, with an owner, with a cost. So that is a way that governance actually comes in. We control the access, the controls without being intrusive. We can basically provide all the capabilities there and enable the business to get better visibility control over all sorts of things, including, for the first time, cost on the end to end.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense. And it also, in my mind, please tell me if I'm wrong, but it also means that the developers don't really have to think about, how shall I say, they don't actually have to learn more about, something that would, if they're moving from, say, a regular kind of a developer motion into more of a DevOps motion, it doesn't require them to kind of add on a level of expertise that they might not need otherwise. This kind of does it for them and kind of fills in the blanks for them. And also kind of helps other organizations or other teams within the organization understand the flow a little bit better, which makes a whole lot of sense. And I think that may be part of the kind of the governance conversation as well, is if we all have a greater level of understanding about what is happening at any particular time, we can better manage it.
Yeah, I mean, secrets management, people hear a lot about that. They don't quite know what it is when you talk to them about secrets management. I mean, something like a password or a user would be, or username would be used maybe throughout a process, and it's a shared piece of knowledge that you don't want to expose. So you keep that consistent throughout your environment, but keep the access controls consistent throughout whoever uses that access throughout the pipeline. And I think that the main thing is that one thing that we learned is that DevOps isn't a thing. It's an interpretation of a thing. The objective is very clear for people, but how they implement it can differ depending on organization, application design, etc. So what we also have to do is make sure that people with lesser skills, and I don't mean lesser skills in regards to infrastructure. Infrastructure can be cloud provisioned, but what if they have to manage all the networking components and the database instances, the things that aren't inherent within a cloud provisioning environment? So we've got to make sure that as developers of different skill levels interact with the infrastructure, we can fill the gaps for them so they can do what they need to do. But if there's networking, etc., that needs to be managed, then the model should be able to give them the guardrails with which to implement that in support of the application requirements for that part of the pipeline. So it is something that we're working on quite heavily to make sure that we can get those guardrails in place.
That's great. And, I think about all of the things that have kind of expanded DevOps, if you will, beyond the original parameters, including, the implementation of DevSecOps and the adoption and DevNetOps and all of these things that have kind of piled on top of DevOps. It can be very, very difficult for the DevSecOps community or the DevOps community to, especially developers, to kind of have to manage all of that knowledge. So having those guardrails in place, I imagine, is going to be very well received by a lot of organizations, simply because we're also talking about the dearth of talent in the developer community these days. So anything that an organization can do to help ensure that there is a level of governance around the way their DevSecOps tools and practices and culture and everything is run, I think is a huge benefit. David, thanks very much for walking me through what you guys see happening with DevOps and governance, and hopefully this is an issue that is going to get better as we move forward, especially, to your point, we do tend to kind of throw technologies at problems, and hopefully this is one that will stick, if you know what I mean. So Thanks again for your time. I do appreciate it.
No, thank you, Charlene. It's been a pleasure.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechstrongTV coming up, so stay tuned.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by TechStrong Live and powered by TechStrong Group.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the webinars preview. You know, I always tell you we have so many great webinars coming up. We've got them on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. I've got 3 here for you that are coming up in the next week or so. Hopefully you can mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called Container Security Best Practices for 0 Days. This one is happening Tuesday, March 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is sponsored by Anchor. The recent Log4j 0-day vulnerability disrupted security and development teams around the globe. This webinar will focus on container security best practices in preparing for and responding to 0-day vulnerabilities and how to prevent them from infiltrating the software supply chain. So some of the things to be discussed include where and when to implement security checks, how to leverage software bills of material to identify 0-day vulnerabilities, how to use policies to automate guardrails, and finally, how to keep development moving securely with remediation workflows. That's going to be a good one. All right, the second one is called Integrate Security Controls Wherever You Build Applications. This one is happening Tuesday, March 15th also. This one is at 9 p.m. Eastern. That's right, folks, I said 9 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This one is sponsored by Snyk. Now, secure software delivery for modern applications requires security tooling that can be integrated neatly into the iterative DevOps model, automating security controls directly into the developer workflow to find and fix issues proactively before those workloads reach production. Snyk has partnered closely with Atlassian and AWS to build native integrations into their Atlassian Bitbucket and AWS code pipeline services, bridging the gap between development and security teams and empowering modern organizations to bring products to market securely without any loss in developer speed. So this webinar will demonstrate how organizations can leverage automated security controls within the Atlassian Bitbucket, leverage open source vulnerability scanning within AWS code pipeline, continuously find and fix vulnerabilities in source control and function repos, and leverage deep insights and actionable remediation advice to fix security issues quickly. All right, the last one on today's webinar's preview is called Adding DevSecOps to Detect and Protect Your Organization's Workspace. This one is happening Tuesday, March 22nd at 11 a.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. Enterprises are scrambling to get a handle on data breaches, source code vulnerabilities, and software supply issues that have the potential to wreak havoc on an organization's software delivery pipeline. Traditional security implementations revolve around a perimeter security posture rather than from within the application. But having perimeter security measures in place, but despite having perimeter security measures in place, recent security breaches have exposed the fact that security involves paradigms that go far deeper into the application stack. This webinar will focus on how to identify, protect, detect, and respond to application security issues across your organization's work streams by instrumenting the Contrast security platform within the VMware Tanzu ecosystem. So this webinar will cover integrating DevSecOps into workflows, leveraging VMware Tanzu, leveraging automation to scale DevSecOps throughout the enterprise, and making security part of the software delivery value stream, as well as some additional approaches to extending security. Good ones, every single one of them. And I see a theme with these webinars these days. It's all about open source software security, folks. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview. I'll be back next week with a brand new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, rounding out today's TechStrong TV broadcast, we have The View with Vizard. And in this one, Mike Vizard is speaking with Dario Forte, who is the Vice President and General Manager for Security Orchestration over at Sumo Logic. And they discuss why the management of security is shifting to the cloud. It's a natural evolution, folks. Let's go ahead and roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Dario Forte, who is the Vice President and General Manager for Security Orchestration at Sumo Logic. Dario, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure for me to be here.
You guys just recently launched a SOAR platform in the cloud. It basically automates a lot of the security orchestration functions that people are dealing with. Why do you think it's important for that to be delivered via the cloud these days versus what we might have traditionally been doing?
Yes, that's a very good question. We believe at Sumo, which, by the way, I want to remember, it's a cloud company. So the most important thing from an architectural standpoint is the fact that being cloud native for Sumo, I will say, is de facto mandatory. Sumo acquired DF Labs, which is the company that I founded years ago, and it used to be a cloud-ready on-prem SOAR company. And now the paradigm is going to shift for full cloud, as we announced a few months ago. And it is very important to stress the point that cloud delivery has a series of very important, valuable points. The first one is the capability of delivering additional content, coordination, even playbook recommendation, integration, and so forth directly from a single location. And that is very helpful both for end users and MSSPs, which are the main targets for Sumo Cloud SOAR. And the capability of scaling this type of delivery is one of the mantra that we have in mind in order to make this new way to deliver SOAR mantra being repeatable for the next few years. We understand that there are still customers that are willing to install SOAR on-prem, but we performed a series of surveys between CISOs and security operations manager and SOC managers all over the world. You know that Sumo is a multinational company, so we have customers all over the world, and we ask them very openly what do they think in having this kind of piece of security infrastructure delivered in the cloud. And the majority, I will say, the strong majority of the respondents were confirming that they are going to move to the cloud for that as well in the next 12 months. And that is a major point major point of evaluation also for people like us that have to design the strategy and deliver the architecture of such crucial component for the next months. And so everything that we are building and delivering in the SOAR is basically designed to live, be maintained, delivered, and scale in the cloud. We have a strong integration with our cloud CM component that is already delivered in the cloud in a multi-tenancy, native multi-tenancy, and is already being adopted by many customers and partners from all over the world. And this integrated delivery is already taken place. We closed several customers last quarter that are already buying both solutions, both delivered in the cloud. And recently, we also announced the availability of two important features for the software. One is the War Room and one is the App Central. That for us, given the type of paradigm that we have in order to deploy and deliver the software in providing value to the customer, are going to be crucial for the near future.
People have been talking about automating security for a long time, and SOAR platforms are not necessarily a new idea, but what's changing now that a lot more folks are looking to automate security?
Two things. First is the easiness to deploy and handle and manage and update, which is a major step compared with the old-fashioned SOAR. One of the major obstacles in the past for SOAR was the complexity of designing, delivering, and maintaining the automation, because a lot of script and a lot of coding language knowledge were required in order to have this stuff working and being maintained. And that was an obstacle, especially for customers and partners that were not sophisticated as that part of that state of the art were requiring. Now the things have changed very quickly, and especially with Cloud SOAR at Sumo, we pointed everything on two major achievements. First is the easiness to use, and second is the easiness to integrate and deploy. On the first part, we worked a lot on the user interface and the user experience that now is absolutely improved, both from a pure usability and, allow me to joke for a second, also from the eye candy standpoint, which is probably somebody will call it the Apple factor, but actually is more deep that easy concept. And from the usability and the integrability and the deployment standpoint, we point out on a major differentiator that for us is the open architecture. Many SOAR on the past, and still some of the competitors are on that side, are very difficult to integrate and closed from a deployment standpoint. Sumo is a different approach. Sumo has a so-called open integration framework, which is a capability that we patented still when we were at DF Labs, that basically allow anybody to write their own integration, their own playbook in a very easy turnaround with really and actually no coding, almost no coding required. And that shorten the delivery time of an integration for example, from weeks, like it happened in the past, to hours, like it happening now. Imagine some of the legacy SOAR were actually needing to build the entire stack of integration actions, for example, in order to be able to function. In Sumo, instead, we have a Lego brick approach. You don't need to build the entire superset of interaction or integration or actions within integration or a connector, for example. You can just build the single actions that you need for that particular use case. Then if you want to increase the volume and the number of actions for that particular integration, you just need to add bricks to your construction, and that makes your delivery time being very, 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 very quicker compared to the past. And another important thing is that with our open integration framework, everybody can write their own integration. Sumo is not needed unless a validation is required or some customer have no time or expertise to build the integration. But everybody can write their own integration, and the result of those integrations go into the App Central. That is actually one of the two objects that we announced a few weeks ago, where this App Central is a central repository where everybody can contribute depending from their security and privacy policy. So it's a very granular kind of container. And those integrations, those playbooks can be uploaded, can be screened, that can be shared depending from the setup and the attributes that the customer want to give to the object, and they can be shared. So let's say, for example, the Log4j kind of incident had a playbook that somebody uploaded very quickly, and the same playbook can be downloaded by somebody else, customized, and very quickly uploaded in their SOAR instance. It's really game changing. And again, you don't need Sumo to govern the process unless you need it, which is a major step for this kind of how do you value?
You mentioned a war room, and if things are becoming more automated, do I need the war room, or what happens in the war room if everything is orchestrated and automated, and maybe we're resolving issues before we need to meet?
So the war room provides security teams with the details of an incident to expedite manual process. That could typically take minutes to now close with a matter of seconds. And if you look at the standards for incident management and security operations, they are actually asking for a detached repository for collaboration and information exchange within an incident. That is required by standards, so ISO, that is required by MITRE, that is required de facto also by RFCs related to incident management and response. The war room solved this problem. So unless you have a fully automated playbook that actually does not require human interaction, the war room instead is a collaboration point where the security analysts can exchange informations, take decision, keep track of those decisions. That is important also from a compliance standpoint, and at the same time have a reusable content that then the machine learning engine can repropose or recommend for the next similar incident. It is a sort of secured container where the authorized people can exchange information and collaborate in order to speed up the incident resolution process.
All right, cool. As we go along here, do you think more security is shifting to the cloud post-COVID-19? It was happening before COVID-19, but do you think that whole process got accelerated because of the pandemic?
I personally think that there is no direct correlation between pandemic and cloud adoption, but there is an acceleration of the cloud adoption also provided by this escalation of pandemics, which is two different things. The importance of having a decentralized but manageable and always reachable set of systems and capabilities is a requirement that is going to increase in the next 12 to 36 months. And cloud is the only option to accelerate this paradigm shift. The interesting thing is that it's not like before where the cloud was viewed by security practitioner as almost something that was almost untouchable, something that culturally people will not approach. Now cloud is something that everybody also from the security standpoint is considering, even in countries that are historically against the cloud. We are having the first cloud deals and adoption in Asia, for example, that are notoriously a little bit reluctant of having security in the cloud. And this approach is changing. So I think that the pandemic accelerated, was not the main cause of paradigm shift, but I think that cloud adoption is going to be the must. And even if you talk with CIOs, so Chief Information Officer, their budget for the cloud operation is going to increase for the next 12 to 24 months.
Do you think that we'll see a lot more usage of artificial intelligence because we're collecting more data in the cloud and we can build those types of models more easily? Is there going to be some advances on that front as a result?
Yes, as soon as AI provider will be able to anonymize and put data in secure environment and handle those data in a secured way. The old-fashioned AI, is going to have possibly some difficulties in adoptions, also because of the increase of the privacy regulations, and also, allow me to say, the balkanization of local clouds, independent also from the countries and the geos where you are, but this is the trend. But the good news is that new AI design is taking care of these new trends. So I think that very soon the valorization of data will be one of the major trends. So I trust that will happen. Of course, privacy will be a bigger concern.
All right. What's your assessment of the state of cybersecurity right now? Are we winning or losing this battle?
We are gradually becoming stronger from a defensive side. So corporate-wise, the things are getting better, still a lot to do. But from a critical infrastructure and government defense side, we are still behind the attackers, so to speak, because state-sponsored attacks on the other side, so on the defensive side, have still some regulatory limitation. There are still countries, for example, that cannot officially answer to attacks in an offensive way because law does not allow them to do it. So when the regulation will change, also on the offensive side, there will be an acceleration. So I trust that this trend will be better again in the next few months.
All right. So what's your best advice then to cybersecurity teams, given all the challenges they faced? The attacks are more sophisticated, they're increasing in volume, they don't have a lot of extra people coming. What exactly should they be thinking about right now?
Automate as much as you can about the routinary tasks and things that don't require your brain to be involved in it. Especially in SOC, there is so big skill shortage that the security analysts cannot afford to spend their time on basic and routinary tasks, and this is where automation can also help. So that is probably one of the major musts for the next year or so. And I personally think that skill shortage is still one of the major issues for CISOs and security operations. So automation can really help them to focus on the important things. Again, don't waste your time on routinary tasks. Automate them as much as you can, and then focus your mental energies on sophisticated things. Because the good news is that there are a lot of very sharp minds that can definitely answer to these very sophisticated attacks. It's just a matter of employing the time in the best way.
Well said. Dario, thanks for being on the show.
It's a pleasure for me. Thank you for being here.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, that wraps up another TechStrong TV broadcast. Hope you enjoyed today's show as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I hope you'll join me on Monday for a brand new TechStrong TV broadcast. Before I close things out, just a quick reminder, we've got a ton of events coming up, live in person and some virtual events down the pike. But right now we are busily preparing for the first of our TechStrong Live events. The first one is the DevOps Cloud Native Live event happening March 29th in Atlanta. Then the very next day, we have Cybersecurity Live, and that is happening March 30th in Atlanta. Then 2 weeks later, we do them all over again in Washington, D.C. These events are one-day kind of roadshow style events, got kind of traditional classroom setting or conference setting presentations in the morning. Then the afternoons are filled with workshops and hands-on demonstrations. So it's something different than your usual conferences. So I hope you'll be able to join us in one of the shows, one of the cities that we're hosting the shows. And then we also have our InnoTech conferences that are going to be kicking off in April. I think the first one is in Austin and then followed in May by Dallas. And then we also have what else do we have for InnoTech this year? We have Oklahoma City, we have Houston, we have Washington, D.C. So lots to look forward to as the year goes on. If you want to check out the dates and locations for our live, TechStrong Live, the Cloud Native DevOps, the Cybersecurity Live events, please, and also the InnoTech events, as well as all of our virtual events and other events that we're having throughout the year, just go to TechstrongEvents.com and you can see the full lineup. Click on each one, decide which one is going to be the best for you. You can take a look at the agenda, the speaker lineup, and register right there. But I'll be here on Monday with a brand new show for you. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. Start pulling out your St. Patrick's Day gear and get ready because we're going to have a good time next week. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, great weekend, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.